Welcome, Sega fans. You know, they say that life begins at 30, and that certainly seems to be the case for one console. I'm Dan the Mega Driver, and this is the Sega Guys podcast. With me as ever is the Sega Rally to my nights into dreams. It's James the SEGAHolic. Mate, how you doing?
Very long, easy right.
Well, since we're getting the props out already.
There we go. That's it. With how many? 20 seconds in?
Yeah.
No, superb, mate. Superb. Up nice and early on a Saturday morning to record this one. Say nice and early. 6 o'clock in the morning. We're up. You were up a bit earlier than me. We've got to get this done. It's the month of Saturn. And the Sega Saturn's 30th anniversary, mate. It's where has that gone?
I know, yeah. So this will be, in terms of airing order, this will be the second podcast in celebration of the Sega Saturn's 30th anniversary. But wow, mate, 30 years. I mean, it still feels brand new to me. I still think of, you know, looking through magazines, thinking it's this hyper exotic, super expensive ultra console that we're not going to get our hands on for years, and yet now it's 30 years old.
Terrifying, mate. Oh, it really is. It's like, and all the memories that we've got attached to it as well. Like, I was writing some down. Obviously, that's the kind of premise of the show, is we're going to talk about our own kind of Saturn memories over those years. And I'm writing things down and remembering things, and it didn't seem like, you know, almost 30 years ago. I know obviously the PAL anniversary for 30s next year, but you know, even just thinking back to those times, and you're like, that can't be 3 decades ago. But unfortunately, mate, it is.
I know.
Getting on, mate. But as you say, it still feels fresh. I think a lot of that's down to the kind of the community, and you know, the homebrew scene, and you know, mods bringing it back to life, and just so much going on. The Sega Saturn has never been more alive than it is right now.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. It's like I was saying, you know, life begins at 30, and it seems like the Sega Saturn is finally getting the love and recognition, at least in the West, that it always deserved. And it is quite funny when you think about most of the West now is buying all of these Japanese Sega Saturns in reality to enjoy, much like they did back in its heyday. But it does finally seem to be getting its lease of life, albeit 3 decades later. But where have those 30 years gone? It's absolutely insane. But yes, as you said, mate, we're going to be talking very much about our own personal memories with this, because we did the Sega Saturn 25th anniversary, didn't we? We must have done that one of the first podcasts we did. And we've done, you know, we had the Sega Saturn years, and you know, we've done my video about my Sega Saturn success. You've done yours. It talks about the history about the console for a few times. So rather than give people, you know, this is what the Sega Saturn is, this is the history behind it. You know, we'll provide some links to our other content in the description and show notes. But this is very much going to be about our own personal experiences with the Sega Saturn, because at the end of the day, you know, they're what make the console for you and us as the gamers. They are what keeps the console alive. You know, these consoles, they're you know, in the physical form, they're made out of perishable materials, you know, hardware. They're not going to last forever. And that's part of the reason why us and SHIRO and Sega Lord X, you know, do what we do, because the big part of that is our memories. And that's why we'd love to hear, you know, whether it's in the Radio Sega Discord, the Sega Guys Discord, or in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. Love to hear what your memories are. But mate, it's looking forward to taking a trip down memory lane with you.
That's it, mate. Let's jog the old brain cells and get those memories flowing, mate. Because as you say, like, it is just a plastic box, but it's amazing how much, you know, you can put into something like that just through memories. You know, the experiences and the feelings and emotions you had at the time that console still manages to trigger. You know, whenever you're playing it, it's like it's a beautiful time capsule back to better days, back to our youth. And just a simpler time in gaming, mate. Whenever you popped a disc in the machine and off you went, unlike my recent Call of Duty install was, to help my wife play the new Call of Duty game. Oh my God. Just really does ram home just what simpler times we were fortunate to be part of, and the Saturn is just it's central to everything that's kind of made us sit here and do this channel. I think it's the catalyst for us doing this, really. So it'll be good, mate. Let's get the memories going.
Yeah, yeah, I can totally relate. I know we've talked, privately over WhatsApp, etc., about the experience of Call of Duty, and that is the antithesis to what the Sega Saturn was. The most complex you get to the Sega Saturn is managing your internal memory saves, your clock, and maybe your Virtua Fighter, Virtua Cop gun calibration. Yeah, that Call of Duty experience is an absolute nightmare, but that is why we are the Sega guys, and we are not Call of Duty info or the Call of Duty podcast or whatever, if there is one. But yes, mate, I think we'll probably just go kind of all over the shop. But initially, I thought we'd start with first hearing about the console, and when we first got our hands on it. But when was it that you first heard about the Sega Saturn?
The first time I seen and heard about it, and I seen and heard it, but it went right over my head. And it was that episode of Bad Influence because I watched that show religiously, absolutely religiously. But they had got that obviously in the studio pretty soon after the Japanese kind of launch. I think it was maybe end of '94. Maybe they were getting these in because remember they had the Saturn and the PlayStation, and
Yeah,
Andy Crane's infamous, it plays games from carts and disc. And PlayStation's games come on a cool black CD, and the console comes with Ridge Racer and all that kind of stuff. But at that point, I think I was watching Nightmare. I remember it was a Thursday, I'm sure it was on, and it was Nightmare and then Bad Influence. And I remember seeing it there. And at the point, obviously they're showing like kind of Virtua Fighter and stuff like that. It still wasn't quite triggering with me that this was something that was going to be. It just again, like you're saying, mate, it felt like something that would be so far away and unobtainable. It looked like, even looking at it on TV, it just looked like a premium bit of kit. This big hulking grey box, and at the time I was still very much entrenched in the Amiga ecosystem, so you know I didn't get like Sega magazines or anything like that. So other than that episode of Bad Influence, like I had no idea when it was coming. I had no idea about what it would look like when it came over here, that it was going to be black instead of the colour, obviously the grey in Japan. So it went right over my head at that point. So that was my first that was it becoming something that I knew of. But in terms of kind of even greater awareness of it, it still pretty much went over my head. It wasn't until the day that I got that surprise, obviously the story up to my uncle's that everyone knows by now. Um, until then, when I've actually seen one, in the flesh. But no, mate, it was that episode of Bad Influence is whenever it kind of first flashed into my eyes. But as I say, there was no real in-depth kind of exposure to it in terms of magazines and things like that.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm not surprised that kind of the launch and everything went over your head because I was someone who was in the Sega trenches. I was getting Me Machine Sega. I was getting Sega magazine in 1994 as well. So like the official Sega Saturn magazine, which was kind of the precursor to Sega Saturn magazine. Um, and I was aware that it was coming. I was getting multi-format mags. I don't know why I got things like CMVG and Games Master because I only had Sega consoles. And I had the Commodore 64, but those magazines didn't cover Commodore 64. I'm pretty sure the software of that tailed off in 1992 at the very latest. So I knew the Sega Saturn, knew that it was out there. I'd seen kind of the mock-ups, the prototypes and everything that had been in those magazines. But I had seen the comments from Tom Kalinske saying, it's going to be $350. It's going to be expensive. Now, I wanted all the Sega consoles. I wanted all of it. I wanted a Mega CD, but the Mega CD when that came out was £299, and it maintained that price kind of all the way into, I'm pretty sure it was still that price in 1994. And you'd see the multi-mega and that was like 300 or quid. And, this idea of a CD-based console, for me, it was just, nah, this is going to be too expensive. And the way they were talking about the Sega Saturn, it was uber powerful, playing like Virtua Racing, Virtua Fighter, all this like legendary stuff you saw in the arcade. So no way am I going to be able to afford that. I can't convince my parents to get me a Sega Saturn. So I was, I was aware of the Sega Saturn, but for me, and I've said this a few times, I was like, well, 32X, 150 quid upgrade, that's got to be the way to go. So I was kind of more focusing on that. And then yeah, the launch almost pretty much passed me by. In the UK at least. Because I did see that episode of Bad Influence. I think they pretty much aired it. It must have been a December episode, mate, because uh they were talking about next year. There was like these consoles are coming out next year, and they actually had them, the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation. And I agree, even to this day, you put the two side by side. We've got some props out. Might have got a Sega Saturn console out. I had a PlayStation in the same box. Should have got that out, but the PlayStation still seems like a toy to me, whereas the Sega Saturn looked like a premium bit of kit. It's just weird because it looks like the Sega Saturn, the PlayStation. You look at Sony devices for the time, and it seems out of kilter with the design and aesthetic of those devices. But the Sega Saturn kind of look like the device you'd expect from Sony. To be honest, it's the
Mm.
original Mark One. Very much looks like you see those top of the line Discmans that were like just gorgeous. That's what the Sega Saturn looks like. Whereas the uh the PlayStation feels like one that you get from Iowa or Goodman's or something. It's
Iowa. A Matsui PlayStation.
Matsui, yes, the Matsui PlayStation. So yeah, it seemed like something that was far too exotic, far too expensive. You got a Sega Saturn? What are you, a millionaire? So yeah, it all it all was kind of this admiration, but kind of from afar, because I just thought, you know, 32X is where the 32X was kind of the Series S, I suppose, because that was the more affordable option, and the Sega Saturn was kind of the you know, if you're a kid and you're asking for a present from your parents, the Series X is the best way to go. If you've got a bit of disposable income, then maybe you get a Series X, and that was kind of how I viewed the Sega Saturn. And the 32X. I could ask for a 32X from my parents for 150 quid. I couldn't ask for a £400 console. I'd get told where to go.
I wonder how many parents though who get asked to buy a PlayStation for their kids didn't realise they had to buy a game and a memory card. But it's a sore point, mate. It just still
Yeah,
niggles.
yeah. What was I think it was Dave, wasn't it, on the PRGE panel, was talking about how the Sega Saturn's one of the first consoles to have internal memory. I mean, if Sega were leading the way with that, because the Mega CD had internal memory as well, but it's not quite as accessible with the UI as the Sega Saturn is. Sega Saturn just perfect in that sense. But I mean, as far as picking up the console, mate, and playing it for the first time, I think we all know the story on your side, but for anyone that hasn't been on there, it's still a great one to tell. And I think it's probably good to talk about those first impressions,
Mhm.
because even though our stories and our first impressions of playing the console are quite different in the home, they do run on a similar theme, I think.
Yeah, I mean the story obviously around Virtua Fighter is and it being the surprise at my uncle's. So my uncle was a pure techie, like in back in the 90s, like he bought anything and everything that was new. So I'm talking like laser disc, mini disc, like consoles. He bought pretty much anything and everything that he could, computers, whatever. The benefit being that whenever he upgraded, yours truly was the beneficiary of the old one. So good times, but yeah, kind of in 95, kind of early 95 through to the kind of summer, he started taking me to the arcade in the city centre called Booth's Enterprises, which is still there, but unfortunately it's all still slot machines. The basement where all the arcade games were, that's all shut off now. I took a wander in to try and record actual footage of inside the arcade and do a wee kind of tour a couple of years ago. And I was told to turn my camera off. Like, you can't record in here. Something to do with gambling laws, apparently. You're not allowed to film inside anywhere there's machines for gambling, apparently. Whatever. Well, I just wanted to show people on the YouTube channel, like, where the games used to be. But, so I used to take me in there on a Saturday, and you would get like an allotment of like a fiver worth of pound coin. You had to choose these games carefully. And obviously Virtua Fighter was very prominent. That was one that I just kind of I was drawn to. It was a big deluxe cabinet. It was loud. It was just the animations of the cat. It was like nothing you were seeing at home on the Amiga. Like, you're thinking about like the Street Fighter 2 port on the Amiga and like Body Blows on the Amiga, which was kind of the best fighting game in terms of quality back then. Virtua Fighter was a million miles away from this. And it was a game that I never imagined like I would ever get to play in the home. And obviously I'd seen that kind of Bad Influence episode, so I knew kind of it was in the back of my mind that it was obviously there was a version, but it was a Japanese console. I had no idea the Saturn was even here. So this game was like, I'm never going to have access to this in the home. So like going to the arcade and playing this, it was just like a treat. It was like just a treat to go and play this. And of course, I used to go up every Saturday and visit my uncle. And on this occasion, on July 8th, later on in the afternoon, I went up and he's blocked me off at the door to his home cinema kind of room. And he's standing there with the controller behind his back, unbeknown to me, smirking at the door. And he's like, wait for it. I'm like, what is it? And I'm hearing the jingles and dilling, dilling. I'm like, obviously don't get that in the arcades. I've no idea what that is. And then you hear the kind of the brief character select music, which again didn't really resonate with me because arcade, it's busy, it's loud. That music wasn't really it wasn't until the pause after he'd obviously just hit the button behind his back to pick Akira, first character that's on, and you hear the fight one, ready, go. And then you walk in, he opens the door, you walk in, and that's running. And he's got it set up. Saturn's on a little table in front of this 55-inch rear projection TV. He's got it hooked up into his 5.1 surround sound system. The thing is literally booming, and he's just got that little case up. That beautiful blue case is just sitting on the table beside it, propped up. And yeah, mate, I walked in and I just, when I heard that, I'm like, he's that crazy, he's probably got a fucking arcade machine in there. But it wasn't, and it was the Saturn, which, as I say, mate, I had no idea it was even out to buy, when it was coming out, nothing like that. And to walk in and see Virtua Fighter running was just, it was mind-blowing. Like, I still remember the excitement, just like, he hands me the controller. I didn't even start playing it first, like, because I just stood there, little looking at the controller. Now, the Mark 1 PAL controller is, people call it a monstrosity, right? And it's not the best Saturn controller by a mile, but I really should get one because I do have nostalgia for it. It's creaky and it's noisy, and its shoulder buttons are not as spongy and nice to click as what the Mark II or Mark 1 Japanese is. The D-pad's nowhere near as good. The shape's weird. The bulky back, it's just what you try to do. Like, it's got like butt cheeks at the back. It's kind of, there's this, you know, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? It's just,
I'm thinking of the Deadpool or Wolverine controllers that you got for the was it for Xbox?
Exactly.
With the butt clips on the pad. Or was it Panda called the Saturn Mark 1 pad? A beautiful abomination.
A beautiful abomination, mate. And that's what it is. But I'm just looking at it and I'm like, oh, could you believe, like, I'm holding a controller for a games console, because obviously, like, I'd wanted the Mega Drive, know that story as well, and to actually finally be greeted with a Sega console, and I walks over, and presses the restart button, gets a beautiful boot animation for the splash screen for the console loading up. And I just sat and played it, mate, for hours. It was mesmerizing. And it just looking up at this giant screen and playing it. And okay, it was with a controller, not with an arcade stick, but for all intents and purposes, mate, I could not differentiate in my mind what I was playing in the house and what I'd been playing in the arcade. It felt seamless. And time has proven obviously that it isn't anywhere near arcade perfect, but for what that game kind of meant to me at the time in terms of seeing it in the arcade so often and thinking I'll never have access to this in the house, to all of a sudden being greeted with it was just phenomenal, mate. It's just such a great memory. A story that's been told time and again, and long-term listeners of the show will know all about it. But as Dave has always said, every story's worth telling because there'll be people that won't have heard it.
Yeah.
And it was just phenomenal. The console itself, the first impressions of that, as you said, mate, premium, that sleek black plastic, the glass effect. Front, also, it's just kind of shiny plastic, but it just, not translucent, but just enough that the power and the access lights just shine through. Those beautiful elliptic buttons that are on it as well. Just everything about it just screamed premium. It just looked like a bit of kit. It didn't look like a toy. It looked like a serious bit of equipment. And I mate, it's just what a day. What a day
Yeah.
that was. And as I say, that's why Retro Prime sent me that copy, a long time ago, a good few years ago now. A spare for his collection, and just that case is just iconic. Like, just looking at it, it brings back. I sit and look at that and just get so many memories alone as well. And the lovely black CD as well. Oh,
Yeah.
I mean,
It is the
retro
original
primes,
Virtua Fighter. The
retro
original
primes.
Virtua.
We
Oh, he's
note that he left as well.
still got
I
his
have
note
kept
as well.
that.
Yeah. The original Virtua Fighter case is, yeah, it is iconic, and it was, as far as promotion, marketing, for what marketing there was for the Sega Saturn at the time, that was the kind of the overriding image that was, and rightfully so. And I think that as a sad thing is, Sega were pretty much right to say, right, well, this is the fate of the Sega Saturn because it had been in Japan, obviously. But in the West, Virtua Fighter wasn't quite as popular, wasn't flashy enough, wasn't edgy enough. Um, it's kind of weird how they have this kind of in Japan, you know, Sonic the Hedgehog isn't as popular, anywhere near as popular as he is in the West. The new Sonic X Shadow game sold 10,000 copies on day one, whereas the rest of the world it sold over 1 million. Barely broke into the charts over yet there, but you know, it kind of shows the difference in culture, I guess. Whereas Sonic the Hedgehog is the big thing over in the West, in Japan, he's kind of a non-event, whereas Virtua Fighter is legendary over there. They're chomping at the bit for a new Virtua Fighter game, which by all accounts sounds like we might finally get.
Yep.
But but for us personally, mate, and this is why I was going to say that there is similarity in our stories, even though they're quite different. You see, for me, because obviously, as I was saying, I was right. 32X is the affordable way to go. I'll save my money. I'll get one of those in 1995. By mid 1995, obviously things aren't quite working out for the 32X. Sega Saturn kind of has its surprise launch in the US, and then it has an also. Don't know if you'd say it's a surprise. It was a weird launch over here. It was so odd. It was so understated. You had the advert, which I didn't see. Um, I've got magazines that have said that there were rumors that it would come out in August. Obviously, it came out in July. So it was a bit of a mess. So for me, I was walking into, I always said it was a game, but I think it was actually in an thinking of where it was in Watford High Street. I think it was an electronics boutique that eventually became a game. And I remember walking in there and they had like three monitors and they had Panzer Dragoon on there, Sega Saturn available now. I was like, oh, what? It's out? £399? I still ain't getting one. But as kind of as the 32X kind of tailed off, and I was saving money, eventually the Sega Saturn became a priority. Now, obviously, it was kind of me earning my £12 a week paper round money and the Sega Saturn price coming down. Eventually, those 2 points intersected, but not until 1996.
I remember I says, mate, before you were the busiest paper boy ever, man. You must have been like, if you were getting paid on a ratio or quota of papers delivered, man, you'd have destroyed any paper boy player. I'm telling you, mate. It would have been
Oh,
like,
you know, if I was paper quite high, I would have taken every route in my old town, mate, to try and get a Sega Saturn. But I was stuck on it was a fixed £12 a week, you know, £48 a month. Which weren't too. Should have saved a bit more, but I think I was still buying other stuff as well. But I was putting money away. But eventually, got to my birthday in 1996, and I finally got a Sega Saturn. So I'm holding up one that looks just like the Sega Saturn that I had back in the day. And this is a Mark II. Obviously, by the time I got mine, there'd been the refresh, the cost saving. Little known fact: the Sega Saturn went through at least 16 revisions. If you hear it, it starts with VA0, ends with VA15, and I'm pretty sure even those middle numbers, you have like an 8A or a 7B and stuff like that as well. So the
yep,
amount of board revisions that went through. So similar to you, mate, the game, this is why I was mentioning Virtua Fighter, the game to have was Virtua Fighter. That was the Sega Saturn, and I was similar to you, getting that home. I thought that we might get a kind of a Mega Drive SVP version, but that was ruled out. There's a reason why wanted to get a 32X, but that didn't come until 1995, by which point the 32X had pretty much fizzled out. Um, I just wanted to play Virtua Fighter in the home. Now I hadn't played Virtua Fighter 2 in the arcade. Played the first one, played it at a wedding venue. It was a huge deluxe cab, sitting in another room actually. So I was constantly out of the actual wedding reception and into this other area where there was a giant Virtua Fighter cab. Even when I'd only had a couple of goes on it, and I was just like, I must have been 9 or 10 at the time, maybe 10. Um, just looking up at it, eyes wide open, mouth open, just staring at it. And the second time I played it was in Gatwick Airport, in one of the areas. They had a couple of arcade machines. So I hadn't actually played Virtua Fighter 2. So, I took my money, 250 quid, went to Dixon's, got a bundle. Not Dixon's, it was Comet. Went to Comet, got my bundle, Sega Saturn, Sega Rally, Virtua Fighter 2, and Daytona USA. And the guy there was like, he's like, don't you want to? You should probably get a PlayStation. I was like, no, I don't want a PlayStation, because I had played a PlayStation. And I've said on the Sega Rally podcast, I'd played a PlayStation the same day that I played, and I said this in my Sega Saturn success video. I'd played a Sega Saturn the same day I played a PlayStation, but this was kind of, Sega Saturn was on a demo pod, and you don't really get the proper feel of a demo pod. You're picking up this controller that's kind of stuck to the pod. You can't move it anywhere, so it's held in place. It was the old Mark 1 pod. The screen on the demo pod was not fantastic. It was all the way up there, with another piece of glass in front of it. Image quality not great. And I played Sega Rally on it. And as I said before, I didn't click with Sega Rally straight away. Whereas by contrast, I'd played not Daytona, Destruction Derby in the Sony store, and they had a queue of people to play it. And they were playing it. I mean, it must have been the biggest TV I'd seen at the time. It was like 50-inch. It was absolutely massive. And it was fun, but my overriding feeling was, one, I wanted to get Virtua Fighter, and two, as much as Destruction Derby was kind of fun, you could compare what Destruction Derby looked like compared to what Sega Rally looked like, and it's night and day. As big as that telly was in the Sony store, as sharp as the image quality was for the time, it just didn't compare. It's, as much as I didn't get on with Sega Rally's handling initially, which obviously in the end I would, um, there was just no getting around the fact that I was getting a Sega Saturn. So, I played the PlayStation in, the best way it could be. I played the Sega Saturn on this crappy demo pod in Argos, a little like department store. So anyway, I've got months later, I've got my own Sega Saturn, 3 games, and of course, the first game I'm going to put in is Virtua Fighter 2. It has to be, because that's the game, that's the killer app. All right, take my Sega Saturn out of the box, take it upstairs, can't play it. Why? Because Sega did not put an RF cable in the box. Now RF was, especially here in the UK, it was the way to connect our stuff to the telly. Connect it around the back, tune it in to channel 0 or channel 8 or something, and go in through that fuzzy RF image. The Sega Saturn, again, being that premium console, was bundled with an RGB SCART cable. So I pulled it out and I'm just like this great big chunky boy. What do I do with this? Luckily, we were renting a TV at the time. My parents were renting a TV from a store called Rumbelows. There's a point where people just that was a thing. You'd rent your telly.
You could rent everything back in the 90s. Like was it Glenn's, Hutchison's, Robinson's, and Stepek was the? Did you remember? It was a 4. If you remember that,
Yeah,
you could rent TVs, you could rent fridges, washing machines, everything, mate. It was like it was a booming market. You can't afford shit in your house just now. Rent one instead, and then upgrade it whenever you like. It's like mad.
Yeah. I remember it was like even in Rumbelows, it was like the advert was "Don't pay any more, Mrs. Moore," or something like that. I was thinking, it's fine. You don't pay your rental payments. They come in, they take your telly away, whatever. If you don't pay your rental payments on your fridge, do they come in, take it out with all your butter and your half open pack of ham and open cartons of milk in there?
The fridge bailiffs come and take your stuff away. It's like you better finish that. You better finish that before we take your fridge. It's like
take yesterday's shepherd's pie out of there.
Oh, renting kitchen appliances, man. Jesus, there you go. That was a thing.
It was a thing. So yeah, we had. So that allowed us, the fact that we didn't have to pay hundreds of pounds for this telly meant that we'd had at the time a decent sized telly. It was a massive 32-inch. Sounds small today, but it was massive back then. And anyone that's thinking, well, I've got a whatever 50-inch flat panel telly, plasma, LCD, OLED, whatever. Yeah, I mean it's much bigger, like in terms of screen size. But let me tell you something, in terms of mass, in terms of size, this went as almost as far back as it went forward. So anyway, we've got this SCART lead from the Sega Saturn. We've gone on there on an expedition to find the hole around the back of the telly, plugged it in, and first game I wanted to play was Virtua Fighter. Virtua Fighter 2 obviously came with a Sega Saturn. I put it in, and I think the thing that you cannot understate is just what a leap using RGB SCART was in those days. You were playing on TV sets back then, CRTs, when you're going through RF, and you've been playing for years either 8-bit, 16-bit consoles, and you plug this fully 3D console in, and you're getting the sharpest picture possible at the time via RGB SCART, and you're playing a game which at the time had a higher internal resolution than anything else, even PC. It was looking at this for another video we're doing, and it had a higher resolution than PC games at the time. And that comes up on screen, and it's similar to you, mate. The fight one, because Virtua Fighter 2 is a funny game in the way that the visual presentation works, because if you go through an OSSE, the image is 4:3, but because the resolution of Virtua Fighter 2 is 480 by 704, if you do it pixel per pixel, it comes out pretty much widescreen. So the menus and the character select screen are all quite, they're sharp, but they're not as high resolution as the actual game. So when I first hit that start button, selected my character, and then the swooping camera came round Lao Chan's stage. I'm pretty sure I was playing as Akira, and fight one ready. And it was just the most amazing, incredible thing I'd ever seen. And it was, mate, it's like having the arcade in the home. And I didn't notice the parallax backgrounds. To me, it looked arcade perfect. And it really was that time where you'd look at Street Fighter 2 on the Mega Drive and the SNES, and you'd think on a CRT, yeah, that's like the arcade. This was the same. It was close enough that I thought it was the arcade, and because it's the first time I played Virtua Fighter 2, it was even more incredible and new. And as much as it blew that PlayStation experience completely out of the water. Even though the screen was bigger and it was being held in the official Sony store, whatever this TV was that we had, Sega Saturn going through that, it was just on another level. And I don't think there was a game to match that on the PlayStation, at least for a year or so. So yeah, that first impression, that first bringing it home, similar to you, mate, Virtua Fighter, that series was so integral and such a huge part of the Sega Saturn's identity. And in terms of impressions, if you played it the right way, it was transformative.
And that's the thing as well, mate. I would imagine even if you did pick up the RF cable that was sold separately, and if that was the way you experienced it, it would probably still be mind blowing. It wouldn't quite obviously you wouldn't get the benefit of the Saturn's high resolution modes. And like, it's funny you're talking about Scarlet. Scarlet's like something that I was like used to from quite early on. I think it was even the Amiga. My uncle had like Amiga cables that were the Amiga interface that went to SCART as well. So from early teens, mate, I was accustomed. I was a pro going round the back and putting that thing in without even looking, mate. That's like a rite of passage, it was going round the back, just like, oh, no problem at all, SCART cable, click, they need to look. But it was a bold move by Sega as well to put the SCART cable in there, because they wanted to give a premium experience. They wanted to give you everything. Again, another thing that factors into the price, because like RGB SCART cables, official ones, like I think they were like 30 odd quid, 25, 30 quid at a time. So they weren't cheap. They were a premium option. And again, you were getting that in the box. So you factor in, obviously, like you're getting your internal storage, your game, and a SCART cable. Price wise, it did stack up in terms of the PlayStation to get a similar experience on both consoles. But Virtua Fighter 2 on Saturn, it runs at a higher resolution than the Model 2 game.
It does,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? So it's okay, it's making the compromises in terms of the 2D, parallax backgrounds and things like that. But as you say, mate, at that time when you're running that, it didn't that just didn't register. Like you've seen that at that WEN reception at that arcade, all of a sudden you're holding a version you can play, and you're looking at this hooked up through the best possible connection. It's just like you'd have been like, what's going on? In Virtua Fighter 2, I think it's a game that it did take PlayStation a long time. Like I say, it took the best part of 3 years. People will hold up maybe Soul Blade, which is a brilliant game, but still 30 FPS. It wasn't until Tekken 3 that PlayStation could actually turn around and go, right, we've got a fighting game that can stand up to VF2.
Yeah,
A gargantuan release. And what you're saying about, Virtua Fighter as well, it is kind of symbiotic with the Saturn.
yeah.
It's the one game, like, if you ask me, like, give me one game, you only let's say one game that means Sega Saturn. It's Virtua Fighter. As much as I love Sega Rally, it's my favourite game of all time. Like, it's just Virtua Fighter and the Sega Saturn. They're just synonymous with each other for me, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, same for me. And it's funny what you're saying about it took them 3 years on the PlayStation to, and I know the PlayStation has an abundance of 3D fighting games, but none really stick in the memory. I know Bloody Raw's got and that's an entertaining game, but that's, quite different.
They're
So
all
it had a load of
shit.
game. Mac Muscles is a big fan of it. Yeah, and it had Soul Blade. Soul Blade was 30 frames per second, obviously lower resolution. But Harada himself, he wasn't kind of the lead on Tekken 1 and 2, but obviously took over the franchise for Tekken 3. And he said when he was challenging, it's in that video where he's challenging Virtua Fighters to come back. Let's have one more round. I do like him. He's good. He's good value, and you can tell you can get his passion. And he's like, in 1996, I was given the team and the project and tasked with one thing. You need to beat Virtua Fighter. And I think we finally managed to do that with Tekken 3. I disagree because I'm not as much of a Tekken 3 fan, but I think if you look at the kind of the mass opinion, the critical opinion, I'm the outlier there. In terms of content, Tekken 3 had it made. In terms of visuals, it's the PlayStation game that stands up best to Virtua Fighter 2. Um, most people say it looks better. Others, ourselves, and I think Maximilian Dude has also said even Tekken 3 is not quite on Virtua Fighter 2's level, but it's close. But it just goes to show because Virtua Fighter 2 is effectively, a first wave Sega Saturn game. It's in the first year, in the first 12 months in Japan, which is absolutely insane. And it took, it just goes to show when the Saturn was firing on all cylinders, it could match anything that or, it's on another level in some cases to what the PlayStation could do. So yeah, it's I think the only the problem with Virtua Fighter is that it is very vanilla in terms of content, in terms of characterization. Be interested to see how they kind of market that for the modern audience.
I think it will be RGG that will be doing it. I think that'll be a cert. I think they'll be doing it. I think was it Ultimate Showdown
Yeah, it was
was
Ultimate Showdown.
that yeah, that was the I think that was the kind of beta test for RGG to kind of see, how it works, how to kind of just let's reskin Final Showdown and kind of use the graphical styles that we've got and let's see how it goes. I think they'll take that on, but I think it'll have to be flashier. And VF did get flashier as kind of years went on, but yeah, VF one and two are they're very kind of straight faced. I think they're
Yeah.
they're very serious. But again, that was Yu Suzuki's whole ethos behind Virtua Fighter. It wasn't meant to be Hadoukens and dragon punches, and it wasn't meant to be whenever you kick somebody in the face, the light flashes. It's like bloody Tekken, you punch somebody and you get lights. It's like what's going on? It was meant to be a serious kind of martial arts based game. What betrays that in Virtua Fighter is the jumping mechanics, baby. It's like jumping on the moon. But that aside, it's so much depth. Like if you commit yourself to one character, like and just try and you could be there for years trying to master all these moves that are in this. It's crazy. But each character as well, they're all based in like real martial arts. And I know there's characters in Tekken as well that are, like Martial Law and he's, Horang as well. They've all got very, Eddie Gordo, they've all got kind of real life based martial art styles. But then you're not going to find a Yoshimitsu in real life.
No.
Well, you might in some areas of Glasgow see a guy walking about with a hat and a sword. It just depends where you go, really, isn't it? But you know, in the main in martial arts, you're not going to find anybody kind of running about a robotic samurai with a sword. But Tekken's always had that kind of that mixture of reality and fantasy. It's in Tekken 3, I remember with the PlayStation magazine, it's at 98, and they gave a demo, a Tekken 3 away, and it came in this. They made a really, really big deal of it. Excuse me. And it wasn't just like a kind of crappy wee CD single style case. It was like a CD album style case, but it was all glossy black with a Tekken 3 sticker on the front, and the disc was all specially printed and everything. They made a really big deal of it, and I remember like playing it, and again, friends in school were no school, crazy less school, but at that point, college, were making a big deal about Tekken 3. It's like just look at it, and I'm like, aye, it's great, it looks lovely, but it didn't blow me away the way it is it because I've been playing VF2 for
Yeah.
years by this point. You know, it's like it just the animations are lovely, they're smooth, the attract mode, you see Hwarang going through all these moves and all that on that kind of dojo screen, the stage, as well, and Yoshimitsu doing all his thing, going to the ground in his wee twirly motion and coming back up again and all that kind of stuff. But aye, it didn't wow me the way it probably did PlayStation gamers, you know, because this magnificent bastard right here had been wowing us
And
for
there
a
it is.
long time. You know, copy of VF2. There we go. Look,
There's my copy of VF2. Yeah,
couple of VF2s there. But what colour's your disc, mate?
mine's blue.
Mine's
This
grey.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you had the grey version. No, it's always been blue for me. Um, well, I got mine. This was a 1996 version. Obviously, it came out in the UK in 96, wasn't it? January
Yeah,
96, we got it.
I'm pretty
Uh,
sure the version that I got was a Monko bought it in Beaties, and the disc that he got was blue. I'm pretty sure it was blue as well. So I don't know what the difference is. Like there's any difference in the game. But I always remember there being two colours of disc. So that was
I had no
quite good
idea
that
about
you've got
that.
the blue and the grey. So there you go.
Yeah, just one last thing on Virtua Fighter. You talking about that it's realistic apart from the big moon jumps. I was thinking about this the other day because for some reason I was watching some martial arts movie clips. Can't remember why. But you know, as we said in the Virtua Fighter um, documentary that we did or retrospective, uh, Yu Suzuki was keen to kind of simulate, you know, not just martial arts, yeah, and it's martial arts combat simulator, but it was basing it on old kung fu movies. And it's quite funny the amount of times you see these slow motion jumps in those films. You see them kind of jump, and you know, like you see it, and their legs like quickly unfurl into a kick or slowly unfurl into a kick, and it's quite common. And I was like, I think that's why they have these slow motion jumps. Obviously, it looks kind of off kilter where the person on the ground is moving at normal speed. I think that's why it is. I'm not. That's just my theory, but I think that is why it is. But yeah, it's I didn't think much about it at the time. I'm used to Street Fighter where you're doing your high massive backflips and everything, it seemed fine to me. But yeah, Virtua Fighter, mate, it's tied with both of our memories for good reason. But yeah, well, the initial impressions of the Sega Saturn out of the way, mate. I think we'll just go straight into other memories now. I'll come to you first. What's one of your overriding memories of the Sega Saturn?
This bad boy, the bootleg sampler demo disc, which was my first exposure to Sega Rally. And this came with the PAL launch Saturn that would later be on the cover of Sega Saturn magazine as well. On issue one, was it not issue three? I think it was. Sorry, issue one had that. Which is our memory, the VHS.
Yeah.
Get to that in due course. But bootleg sampler, mate. Playing Sega Rally, obviously you get the single track. It's on Forests just versus one other car. It's got Ignition as the music track as well, and that's why that particular track in Sega Rally is it's an instant kind of take me back. Like Condition Reflex is my favourite song on the Sega Rally soundtrack, the new version, the Saturn version, the range. But Ignition, mate, it's just something about that tune. It just takes you straight back. I remember putting that bootleg sample into my CD player just to listen to Ignition. Oh man, just so good. But again, playing let's say Sega Rally that track and seeing that level of visual detail, like the cars were giant. Again, you think back to what I'd been playing on the Amiga, stuff like Jaguar XI 220, Lotus Turbo Challenge 2, brilliant driving games, but nothing in comparison. I still remember the first time I drove through the tunnel on Forest Stage, and it's got lights in the tunnel. And obviously, looking at it now, it's just very clever texture work to simulate lights. But just the way that the light changed, the sound changed when you go in the tunnel, like you drive up the tarmac and little birds flutter and go out the way and all that. Just all the little details that just made it seem so powerful. Like this machine can do anything. Like it was just like you just couldn't believe what you were playing. Yeah. With a couple of other shots, you get World Series baseball on there. Couldn't hit the ball for shit. Took me years to actually get a home run in that pain in the arse demo. Clockwork Knight 2 and Bug as well was playable on there on our version. Wasn't playable on the first run of Bootleg Sampler in America, but it was on the second run. It was only a rolling demo on the first edition of Bootleg Sampler in America, but I mate, just playing Sega Rally, it was just again, it just kind of it reinforced that whole feeling of power and prestige and just sheer or just this premium gameplay experience. This was like nothing you'd ever seen in the house before. And this little copy, I picked this up on eBay for a fiver. You know what I mean? It was just, it was pretty good nick as well. So that's one of the things that's what I did. Obviously, people know I've got like my Fenrir and my Saturn. So things that I've acquired are just, again, they're tied to memories. And that's very much one of them. Just love that cover as well. Look at that, just
yes, gorgeous with the
lovely. Well,
the Saturn logo, like the sun.
the sun setting in the background, mate. That's it. And but and again, also the bootleg sampler is the reason why, for decades, the big butt Celica has been ingrained, because whenever I did get the retail version, the first thing I noticed when I got home is that they changed the goddamn car model. And the bootleg sampler was obviously taken from that kind of October build. There's like 75% complete, no attract mode, slightly different, use of markers on the title screen as well to symbol where you goes a wee kind of blue Saturn logo that moves down the menu. They took that out. No replays, nothing like that at all. No kind of replay music or anything like that. So a very basic version, but you can now get that on Hidden Palace. I've got it on the Fenrir in there, so you can still play it. The full arcade mode with the slightly tweaked color palette. The greens and browns are a little bit lighter on the kind of the bootleg sampler build, or the demo build, the 75% complete one. But for years, mate, it kind of stuck with me, and it was obviously Pandemonium answered it in his epic documentary. It was nothing to do. There was myths down the years. It was to do with the Saturn not being able to render the big Celica model for the full game without compromising performance. It was nothing like that. It was just a case of Sega wanted to make it more realistic, more up to date on the Saturn version. That was all it was. So but I do love that kind of more arcade style Celica. But as I said, after Nick got it confirmed why it was changed, I have found peace with it. I'm quite happy using the retail version now. So, but bootleg sampler, mate, it's as integral a memory as Virtua Fighter 1. Just I went through that demo disc so much. Like rolling demos as well. Virtua Cop was a rolling demo on there. Daytona, Panzer Dragoon, Cyber Speedway. Less said the better. But again, a brilliant memory and a great little disc to have as an extra as well, just to kind of supplement that pack in VF.
Yeah, and that wasn't bundled with the console, was it, initially? I think in the UK, I think you had to send off for that, didn't you? And it was bundled later on.
That's what I'm trying to think, is like the whole kind of that time frame, because there was also the Panzer Dragoon demo disc as well, and I'm sure you had to send away for that, and it came in a beautiful kind of, again, cardboard fold open cover and a little message inside saying, oh, something, welcome to the world of Panzer Dragoon. You're about to experience a 3D world like no other, and a black and white picture of the kind of the dragon in the inside cover. But I know it came with, I'm sure it was issue 3 of Sega Saturn magazine that it came
Yeah.
with, but it didn't come with that cover. That was the one it was bundled with. So it was somewhere in those initial kind of opening weeks or months that I played that. Now, I thought it might have been bundled with it, but it's, thinking back, it's like I don't remember playing that on the day that I played VF. So it may well have been like, I've seen Sega Retro saying that it was bundled, but I think they're talking about the American version. And I think it was bundled later on with later PAL releases, like later kind of PAL runs, like kind of subsequent kind of months. But
Yeah.
aye, it's anyway, he sent away for everything, my uncle, man. And registration
Mhm.
cards, man, he filled them in the minute he got them out the box, honestly. Which is why he got VF Remix, because he registered his Saturn straight away, and we got that free copy of Virtua Fighter Remix in the big cardboard box with the double dual case with the CG portrait disc in the back. But aye, it's still bootleg sampler, mate. Just amazing, amazing
Yeah.
demo disc.
Yeah, I never actually got the chance to play it. So I've always enjoyed hearing you talk about it. It's interesting to see how it differs from the US one as well. And yeah, I don't know if it was bundled with the sound. It sounds like I mean, according to you, it didn't sound like it does. It was. Sega Retro does say, I was just checking just now, and that does say it was a pack-in. But obviously Retro is, depending on sources and contributors and the community. So it's kind of like most wiki sites, mate. That they're not always 100% correct, although they're absolutely fantastic, the work that they do on there. I mean, I've noticed some things like, I think Sonic 2 on the Game Gear, for example, is still stated as coming out in November, whereas I know for a fact it came out in October over here, the 8-bit version. So it's one of these things. I don't know if it's like a Mandela effect or something, or what it is, but yeah,
Mm.
well, I suppose one day we might find out the truth around bootleg sampler. But yeah, sadly, I never got to play it. I didn't get those early versions of those early issues of Sega Saturn magazine because I didn't have a Sega Saturn at the time. I was still playing my Mega Drive, playing the Lights of Comic Zone, and I think Theme Park was one of the games that I was playing. So I never got to play that particular demo disc. What I did get to play was this little number, and this is Sega Flash Volume One. So this one 100% did get bundled with my Sega Saturn console. Demos of I think it was a watch demo for Virtua Fighter 2. And then you had Sega Rally, and both of those were kind of redundant to me because I got those two games in my bundle. Baku Baku Animal, I thought was fantastic. Really enjoyed that, and I'll get that later. Golden Axe Duel gets a bit of stick, but I think it's it's a fine Samurai Showdown clone in Golden Axe Golden Axe clothes. Right down to the way your Super Meter feels. You've got your 6 buttons and your 6 clicks like a Street Fighter game, and then you've got the camera that pans out and zooms in depending where the action. So it's kind of like a blend of Capcom and SNK fighters, but made by Sega. It's not amazing, but it's solid. But the game that really blew me away, mate. And it's kind of love at first sight when I think about the Sega Saturn. Say Virtua Fighter 2, it's like on the big RGB SCART telly. It's like, whoa! I played Sega Rally, and it's like, this looks amazing. I'm finally getting used to the hang of that. I played Daytona USA, and whatever anyone thinks about the visuals on that, God, it's a fun game to play on Sega Saturn. It's incredibly fun to play on Sega Saturn, and I was hooked on that as well. Then I go to the demo disc, and I play Baku Baku. I play a little bit of Golden Axe Duel. But I think the first game that I went to on the demo disc was Panzer Dragoon's Vi. And you go in with the, I think it gives you the intro. and then you go straight in with the episode 3 in the forest. And you talk about visual spectacle and being blown away, and that was another time that I was absolutely astounded by what I was seeing and what I was playing. It's just you come in and you come in from, it's like start from side on. The episode 3 window opens up, and you get that kind of that long note that plays. It goes doo doo, and then the music's like doo 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 doo, and you got all these other ships coming in and everything. That's just like, I was just like, wow, this is amazing. And of course,
These graphics are rad.
yeah. I mean, you'd obviously played the first one at the time. I'd only seen the first one on Bad Influence and via that demo pod that I was talking about at the beginning when I first saw the Sega Saturn. Of course, Panzer Dragoon's Vi is a massive step up in terms of visuals, and it was just like, wow, this console is the greatest thing ever made. So, and I think it's another thing, we'll admit we started off talking about how Call of Duty is such an absolute nightmare to kind of log in, start and play. It doesn't even work with quick resume on Xbox. It's a nightmare. Versus the simplicity of, just sticking a disc in and playing. Make demo discs and demos these days. You just don't get those either anymore. I know
Yeah.
PlayStation 5 came with Astrobot or Astro's Playroom, whatever it's called, which is pretty cool. But in terms of actual game demos, it's just not a thing anymore.
Demo discs were the staple of our gaming diet back then, mate. They were absolutely necessary. And I know you get Game Pass today, right? So you're still paying a monthly fee. So you could argue that we were buying magazines, they buy Game Pass, they get the full game, we get demos. But like it's a different thing whenever you're getting, like, you looked forward like to these new demo discs. Now on the Saturn they weren't monthly. You know what I mean? Like on PlayStation Magazine, it was one every month. There was that much stuff coming out. PlayStation could fill a disc with absolutely
They weren't always good either.
No, there was some proper dog shit on those. But even in '97, mate, there was some proper dog shit on those, and even probably worse. But getting a disco, like a demo disco on the Saturn, was just being able to have even like videos, seeing what was coming. But whenever you got to play something, man, it was special, especially if it was a game that you'd seen for a few months in like magazines prior. That you finally got a playable demo of something. It was like, oh, I get to try it. Oh, it's like I've only been able to look at pictures that close to try and get details. We've all done it whenever we've had magazines that like exclusive first look, tiny little picture. It's like this little tiny wee picture. It's like we have to look right in at it, but you finally get to play it. And oh man, demo discs were great. It's funny you're talking like Panzer Dragoon's Vi, because like the first game holds a lot more weight in my memory, just because again I played that one first. Like the second game is far and away, like visually, performance wise, blows the first game out the water, but there's still just something about that first game. I think as much as, whenever you're talking about your dragon kind of morphing and growing up and becoming more powerful, and you still do have that sense of kind of desperation and isolation, I still think in a different way, the first game conveys it, from a slightly different angle, because in the first game, you've inherited this dragon and all these memories, and you've been tasked with that. So you kind of almost feel the burden of the mission put on you, and you're all of a sudden alone with all these expectations in this vast world with all this shit trying to kill you. But in the second game, you again have that, as I said, that sense of isolation, desperation, but you're almost feeling like you have to nurture the dragon. So it's great that they have the same overriding feeling of kind of a post-apocalyptic kind of world and you against this vast army, but they come at it from two kind of different viewpoints. But episode 3 and 4 in the first Panzer Dragoon game, like again, and it's a big thing about the Sega Saturn as well, is music. like there's so many brilliant pieces of Sega music on Saturn that are just locked in there. And one is the Empire. You know, that dun, 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 that bass at the start. It's amazing. You swoop through the kind of it's like kind of like a mine, almost like they're mining. There's like turrets and
Yeah,
cannonballs and shit.
bloody turrets.
I know. But you lock onto like a cluster of them.
Yeah.
And it's like, but aye, and in episode 4, traversing through those tunnels, you know, and the way the camera swoops and moves and drops, and oh my god, DiCaprio gif. It's like, you know, just unbelievable. But aye, like SVI is stunning. Like that mission, obviously the later on, the one that you and Mel were talking about when we spoke to him, you know, you're flying over the ship and you go in and out, and it's like the one thing Panzer Dragoon's always done is just scale, like sheer scale. In no small part down to VDP2, being able to draw these vast distances. It just made the world look like you didn't feel that you were constricted. Even though you're on rails, you never felt constricted. Like it felt like you could see the world unfolding before you. It was just two brilliant games. But aye, it's quite interesting that obviously Panzer Dragoon's value that experience on that demo disc, mate. And I don't know if it'll have been out by the time this airs, but the Zwei video you did is phenomenal, man. It's like this you can feel the kind of passion and impact that game's had on you through that. So if you
Thank you, mate.
have, if it has been out, hope people enjoyed it. If it hasn't been out whenever you're watching this, you're in for a goddamn treat. And even if it has been out and you're watching this, you've not watched it, go and watch it. You're still in for a treat.
Thank you, mate. I think they carry similar themes, the first and second game, and I think the reason probably why the first one resonates is one because it's the first one you played out of the two, whereas I didn't get to play the first one. But two is that the first one is a much more abstract experience from a narrative perspective because it's like just got this guy is just going out on his day job. He's out with his mates riding his beasts, and all of a sudden he gets sucked into this adventure. He gets this guy that dies on this giant lizard in front of him, touches him, and is like, here, here's all these memories and this mission. Off you go. It's just like, oh shit, I've got to do this now. And there is like, there's the abstractness and like um, you got that sense of duty that you don't quite understand is kind of what you are the Dragon Rider in the first game because he's not named. And he's not named in the game. In like I think it's the Japanese manual. He's called Kyo Flu, but he doesn't speak. He doesn't. He's to all in purposes. He's like the Master Chief of Panzer Dragoon. Whereas in the second one, you have the whole intro establishing, right, well, this is the character, this is his backstory, this is where he comes from, this is how he meets the dragon, this is how he raises the dragon, and this is why, because his whole village gets completely nuked to hell. That's why he's out there. And then in between, he's given his narrative, he's speaking, well, this is why I did this, revenge, sort of, at least at the time, and all that sort of stuff. I fled into the forest like a scared little sheep. And you're not him, but you are playing as him and experiencing his story. So that's why, in a way, I can understand Panzer Dragoon being a more personal experience. Whereas the second one establishes these connections with these characters. And the second one, I love the second one for the way that it does that. But, it's kind of that old video game adage, do you prefer to play someone else's story or do you want to experience the story through effectively your own eyes? And I think that's kind of the difference between the two. I don't think anyone, and I think it's good that they do different things, to be honest. And Panzer Dragoon Saga kind of blurs the line between the two, without giving too much away around spoilers, but kind of the whole Edge Divine Visitor sort of thing. It kind of takes both approaches, which is really clever. So all three really complement each other. But I think that's probably why, mate.
Aye, it's just a brilliant trilogy of games. And obviously the kind of third one, Panzer Dragoon Saga, is the RPG, but the first two games are just, for being on rails, it's a cinematic aspect of them as well. Like you said, in Zwei you get like the narration. You're hearing the thoughts of this character. Whereas in the first game, though, as you said, I think the most kind of expressive he gets is whenever he's stunned, watches a dragon come down out of the tunnel, and
Yeah.
he just drops his gun on the floor and then just falls. It's like it's a, he just can't believe what he's seen. Then he gets rescued at the last second. The flames are coming and he swoops in and takes him away. But I just two phenomenal games. But I made demo discs
Yeah.
integral to mid 90s gaming.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Panzer Dragoon's Vi would be the second game I bought outside of my bundle. And I'll talk about the first one maybe in a bit, mate. But in fact, what was the first game you bought for the Sega Saturn? Because obviously you got your uncle got a number, but obviously you got your own Sega console later on. But what was, what's the key purchase that you got?
I think the first Saturn game I bought with my own money was X-Men Children of the Atom second hand.
What a game! What a choice!
That just put it was Game Zone in Partick, and it was for the second hand section. And the front cover, the cardboard cover was a wee bit kind of tatty at that point. But it certainly wasn't as in good nick as some of these games here. But aye, that was it is that case, mate. That is stunning.
Well,
Love that.
it's chatty. It's
No,
proper.
but
The,
just
the,
aye. And again, taking that home and playing it, it was like the animation. And I know that it's got long loading times, and it's 50 hertz and bordered and blah 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 and all that. But again, these are things that you only know about and can talk about like now and later on. Like back then, you've rushed into the shop and bought a game, you've gone home with it. You're not caring about that. And with Children of the Atom, it was really like this is a comic book, like coming to life. Like the animation, the level of detail on the characters, the backgrounds, it was ridiculous. Like the first time you see Sentinel fly onto the screen and like form in front of you, on his components are just building up, and the hands count, the fingers, and then
Rocket Punch.
holy, I like holy shit. Like, oh, incredible. Absolutely incredible. Again, just another aspect of the Saturn as well. We're talking all about 3D stuff here, but the 2D stuff, mate, and there's another 2D game which I'm sure will get brought up in due course from Capcom that is integral to the kind of Saturn experience for both of us as well, I think. But Kota was the first game that I picked up with my own cash. What about yourself, mate?
Yeah, I'll talk about mine and so, but I'm really glad that you brought up X-Men Children of the Atom because that wasn't one. We're talking about memories, and I've got so many memories attached. I'm sure we both have. But the first time I saw Kota or Children of the Atom was on. It was either, and it's quite funny thinking about it. We had Games World Bad Influence. We had Games Master Game Bad Influence and Games World, which was on Sky. I think it was Games World that I first saw it, and they were having like an arcade challenge,
Games
and
World,
that
man.
and they had the
Wow.
um, Big Boy Barry and all that lot, the
Aye.
Games Masters, um, and they were showing Children of the Atom like in the arcade at the time, and this would have been 94, 95, and I was just like watching the telly with my mouth open. I was just, oh my God, it's like they're playing the comic book. And then wouldn't be later, and I see the screenshots in Sega Saturn magazines, and I just see this game, and I'm just like, oh my God. And yeah, it's like you say, mate, we've been talking about how blown away by the 3D stuff we were. The 2D stuff, and bear in mind, Children of the Atom didn't come to the PlayStation until 98, I want to say, maybe
97,
97.
it was a bit, it was a good couple of years later it took, and it was shit.
Yeah, it was still. So, another triumph for the Sega Saturn there, an absolutely phenomenal port, phenomenal game. And again, it's quite hard to like give people the idea of what it was like back then. That, yeah, 3D, 2D you take for granted. 2D is retro now, and it's kind of all more about the art style. And 3D was the thing back then, was the thing that everyone was excited about. But these 2D games were still still astonishing. So yeah, what a pickup, mate. I didn't actually pick it up until 98 myself. Still loved it. It's a bastard hard game though. It's probably the hardest fighting game I think Capcom have ever made. Um,
Aye, even in easier difficulties, it's still a right challenge. It's
yeah,
it's it's tough as nails, but I just visually gorgeous, unbelievable.
yeah, it really is. The first game that I picked up with my own money, kind of a residual birthday money from that initial pickup was, of course, Nights into Dreams. This is the jewel case that actually came with the big bundle with the analog pad, which
Yep.
I thought I had out, but I don't. Um, oh, well, there is actually the Japanese one here. That's not the one that I got at launch.
Dan just had a Blue Peter moment there. Here's one I prepared earlier.
So yeah, some Nights into Dreams. Obviously, huge Sonic fan. Sonic on the Master System was the game that just kind of solidified me as a Sega fan. And obviously, once I got the Mega Drive, I got Sonic 1, 2, 3, Sonic and Knuckles. I absolutely lived those games in the 90s, and I'd always keep going back to them. Because of course, whatever Sonic team were making, I was all in on. They could have made a Sonic team game that was called Dan Driver's a Dick, and I would have bought it and loved it. But yeah, I remember picking it up, and I remember reading all the previews and everything, and I just couldn't quite get my head around what it was meant to be. And I think the thing with Knights is it's not your standard game. It's all sorts of things. People compared it to Crash and Mario, which it isn't a platformer at all. Um, it's very cinematic, but it's still a very arcade centric score. It's predominantly an arcade centric score based experience. Um, but I think a lot of people pick it up, and I've seen some people say that they hate Knights, which is odd. But the thing about Knights is you just kind of got to go in. There's videos out there that say this is how you play Knights, and there was no guide that I followed. I didn't follow a guide to say this is how you play Knights. My journey with Knights was very much a case of discovery. I was going in, I was like, well, what do I do? All right, moving Clarence Aurelia around, not sure what to do. Then I went into the Knight's Chamber, failed at that a few times, trying to gather the Idia, the blue balls to take them to the palace. Um, Eventually got C ranks. I remember getting really pissed off fighting Claus, who's the stage 2 boss for Elliot in Frozen Bell, which is the snow level. He's the cat that jumps around on the exploding mice. And I couldn't quite.
Oh,
And now I know you go the top one, you go one way, the bottom one, you go the other way, and you duck you attack every other mouse, and you can get it done in like about 10 seconds. But I failed so many times. And I was meant to. I remember one memory of this was that I was doing that level, and some mates were like watching me do it because we were meant to be going over and like having a sleepover. And I had a big old sulk and a strop because I couldn't beat that boss. And I said, I'm not coming out anymore. I'm gonna play this, which they
this
took the piss out of me,
this
deservedly so often.
fucking this boss. You can go your own sleepover.
It was like that. But yeah, and it went from just about getting through the levels to okay, I can get a B rank in all of these stages now. And then I completed it for the second time, and it's like, oh my God, there's extra stuff in the ending now that I've got all B ranks, and then I got all A ranks, and that unlocked even more stuff. And then it just became this case of trying to, you know, you put on trying to get the best score possible, finding new ways to beat bosses faster. And that has turned itself into this 28-year obsession that I still play today. I still play it, still try and get high scores, which I thought I was pretty decent at it. And then the SHIRO crew got involved, and Dave showed his godly skills, and then Peter Malik showed that he's just on another planet. And now I think Gaming for Ages put something out saying that we've got to do a score attack thing again on Christmas nights. And it just goes to show that just like Sega Rally, Nights into Dreams is just one of these evergreen games that you know, there's no skill ceiling on. And like Sega Rally, where people are still trying to chip away at those times today, people are still getting high scores. And I think that's the overriding memory, mate, and I think when I did the A ranks on Nights into Dreams, I actually took the Sega Saturn back downstairs because I think my parents had gone out for the night or gone away again. So it's like come off the crappy. I'd got an RF cable then, which you were talking about the price earlier. The RF cable was £14.99. I remember that because I had to buy one myself. And the SCART cable was 30 quid. So that's another reason probably why the price was so high. Whereas the PlayStation RF was this crappy little rectangle. You didn't even have a switch on to plug into. So yeah, so I brought it back downstairs. Like if I'm going to get extra stuff in the Nights into Dreams endings, I want it on the big telly with the crisp picture. And I remember just I was sat about 3 feet away from this massive telly, like right there, just trying to spot all. Is there anything extra that I'm going to see in these endings here? And it's just like,
Like Ace Ventura in the swimming pool.
yeah, that's it. Yeah. I was like, the colours are different there. Oh, this has changed. I was like, well, the colours weren't different. They were just richer because I was watching it on for a
Better
SCART as
connection.
opposed to crappy, super soft. But yeah, but that was like the hook was these experiences and the narrative and the music and everything just pulled me in on nights. And then it's the score, and that was just the kind of the gateway drug to the obsession with the score. So yeah, that was the first game I bought, mate. You know, it was Sonic Team. I had to have it, and that just turned into something quite like anything else. And you know, it goes head to head with Sonic 2 for my favorite game ever. It is quintessentially Sega as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I remember again, Monco buying that PAL bundle, the Knights and the Control. It was Dixon's on Argyle Street, which is now a TK Maxx on the corner of Argyle Street and Miller Street. And I remember as well, yeah, you would walk in the double doors and the game section was just up behind the cash desk on the right hand side, the far wall. And I remember they went up there and he picked it up. And I went home and just, again, like you, mate, whenever you got it, it's like there was no real, like, like games today very much hold your hand. But like nights just let you loose. Like, just let's go and figure it out. It's like,
Figure it out.
and Adam Corlick style. But it's and again, I couldn't understand at first why. Like, I'm thinking, I've got these 20 chips. I've released Idea. I've went back. Why am I getting D's and C's? Like, I've done it before the time's ran out. What's your problem? It's not until you realise you can fly over the capture, you
Yeah.
know, and continue to use your time to do links and whatnot. And like you said, like you thought Dave was good, and then you see Peter, man, for God's sake, like, Peter's like ridiculous at that game. But I saying that you hate nights, I think is like I dislike a lot of things in gaming just through personal opinion, but I would like I have a dislike PlayStation, for example, and especially modern PlayStation, but like I would never go as far as say I hate it. Like I've got plenty of good memories playing PlayStation consoles, but it's like just I mean, obviously I hate something, but no, Nights is cleverly this, as you say, quintessential Sega arcade score attack game. And I think where Night suffers in terms of its legacy, in terms of representing itself to new players, is because there's still that attachment of the Mario 64 killer, and even Sega Saturn magazine were guilty of it. Knights goes head to head with Mario 64 on the cover, and I'm like, it's not a platform game. And it's like, it's unlike anything. Again, just Sega breaking boundaries, doing things different. There was nothing like Knights, nothing at all. And with the 3D controller, it's just absolute perfection. Like you can play it with a normal D-pad and have fun with it, but the range of movement you get with that analog stick, that absolutely brilliant analog stick on the 3D controller, it's another level. It gives you the precision. Like, and it's funny you mentioned that it's kind of like Sega Rally and that kind of whole like beating your time and try to beat your score and get better rankings and whatnot, because like the control is part of that. Like when you use that analog stick, like you feel that Knights is so responsive, and that's key to the little tweaks in movement to keep your path. Because if you're a millisecond out, you're not making that next link and the chain breaks. It's very similar to in Sega Rally, adjusting your wheels in mid-air on the over jumps to make sure when you land that your car's not going to go skidding off left or right. And it's just these little kind of things that Sega build into their controls, the connection between the game and the controller, and that feeling of being in control, so down to the absolute, millisecond or millimeter, whatever you want to, whether it's Knights or Sega Rally, it's key. It's not just a case of here's a controller. They haven't bundled it with a controller for nothing, just to sell a controller. It's because it's integral to the gameplay experience. And again, I think that wee comparison with Sega Rally was quite good, mate, because worlds apart in terms of genre, but in their gameplay, they share that kind of Sega kind of that little kind of hook in there.
Yeah. Yeah, and they both play better on Saturn than anywhere else. You can play Nights into Dreams on modern systems. You can even play it for free. It was free recently on PC, albeit unfortunately it's being delisted in at the time of recording, by the end of this month. But the thing about Nights into Dreams ports is that they're all based on the PlayStation 2 version. PlayStation 2 analog control is not as accurate as Sega's, not as accurate as Xbox's. And the Nights into Dreams on the PlayStation has to account for a lot more analog dead zone, and that is reflected in the later ports. On PC, you can get mods to improve analog precision, but still plays better on Sega Saturn than anywhere else. Just like Sega Rally, on Sega Saturn. There's the port on PlayStation 2, which feels like the arcade, but as we all know, as Panda's documentary said, Sega Rally was optimized for home consoles, handling was improved, and as such, it's still the best way to play.
That's it, mate. It's just the fact that the game. I'm just looking through here. I'm trying to remember Insane Mega CD facts. I done a tweet. Is it just me, or is Sega Rally Championship on the PlayStation 2 just not as good as the Sega Saturn version? And they'd put a little photo up of their PS2 version beside that, and someone had replied saying, you would think that the PlayStation 2 version would be better because it's arcade perfect, and I'm like, I kind of replied saying, no, the reason why the Saturn version plays better is because of what Sega put in there into how it feels. And Mizuguchi's confirmed through Panda's documentary, we've discovered what we've always said. Sega Rally on the Saturn is not a port. It's its own game built for the Saturn, and that's why it's better. The graphics are nowhere near as good as the Model 2 version. They're still fucking spectacular as far as I'm concerned, but the graphics don't make a game. It's the old saying, gameplay, and that's what the Saturn version of Sega Rally has in abundance. Gameplay, just like Knights does. That gameplay hook. There's obviously something there that people our age and newcomers, they'll just keep coming back to these games, taking part in these squad attack challenges. It's because of the gameplay is in there. It's quintessentially Sega. I put my teeth back in this morning, mate.
Yeah, no, it really is. Games like Virtua Fighter, they're all in the spirit of arcade competition, which is why, for us that grew up in that arcade era, is just what makes it so special. But mate, what's your next memory you'd like to share just around the Sega Saturn?
Well, I think I'm going to bring up this lovely VHS, right, which Andy Mackey sent me. Thank you very much, Andy. Top guy. But the big three, mate. So we've spoke about, Virtua Fighter 2 and Sega Rally. So we won't kind of dwell on them too much because we'll get in a bit of detail on those. But obviously the kind of trifecta being, Virtua Cop filling the last slot. And like that VHS came with issue 1 of Sega Saturn magazine. It first became Sega magazine, became Sega Saturn magazine. And, there's other stuff on it. Children of the Atom, Clockwork Knight 2, Mortal Kombat 2, Alien Trilogy, Defcon 5, Virtua Racing, Hang On GP, F1, Mysteria, Cool spot, robotica, bug, and more. But the stars of the show were the big three. And, you know, that's where I first seen Virtua Cop running on Saturn. And from the minute I watched that tape, like again, seeing that and the arcade game had been in booths, as I said, they had the big three, all the proper big deluxe cabinets facing out into the street, with the big double doors open, people walking by, people missing their bus because of crowds. There's a bus stop right outside that arcade, and it's still there, that bus stop. And grannies going by with her shopping. I missed my bus, you bastard, because all these people are like that. Because the clever tactic, show these three cutting edge games, get people coming in, spending money, but being aware of Virtua Cop and then seeing it on that tape and like eventually getting it, for the kind of the Christmas it was in W.H. Smith's, as I've mentioned before, bottom shelf in the Virtua Gun bundle and playing Virtua Cop in the home. Oh man. And I think like we've spoke with Dave and Mel in the past about Virtua Cop, and I don't think anybody could have imagined that the Saturn would do not just Virtua Cop, but all three of those games the justice that it did. But Virtua Cop is just, and again, it's why you prefer Virtua Cop 2. I'm a Virtua Cop 1 guy. Just there's something about that kind of, it's texture mapped because it's Model 2, but it's still got a little bit of the kind of Model 1 style flat shaded, the way the bad guys look in their suits. They still look a wee bit kind of Model 1-ish. But, just the contrast of the kind of the kind of cop 90s cop movie kind of setting, the soundtrack, that kind of jazzy, funky kind of 80s, 90s kind of cop action movie, kind of dramatic music. And then those reticles, those green, amber, and red, zooming in, and the way the camera swoops around. And then, as we've discovered through Panda's videos, that it's a team of rookies that took this on. Their first project being supervised by Yu Suzuki, and they nip and tuck and use VDP 1 and 2 to insane effect. And the end result is incredible. Like playing Virtua Cop on that 55-inch rear projection TV with a Virtua gun that it's lighter than the arcade gun, but it's the same mold as the arcade gun. So again, you're getting that arcade experience transmitted into the home. And you start, as you play Virtua Cop, first thing you do, take out the two windows in the wee kind of cabin on the left hand side, because the wee guy going to pop out that right hand window. You get to know all these wee things, and like getting those triple shots, I used to love that. See, and like you flick your wrist to reload, you got to the point where you were absolutely lethal at the game. I would like reload after every triple shot, and also was kind of areas where you knew you had to take single shots. So like the kind of three guys on the left hand side going up the crane, and they go, yeah. The scream they do is you get them because you can't triple hit them. But Virtua Cop, man, just again for seeing it on that tape, to have played it in the arcade, to then getting it in that bundle, and again the Saturn version's got that kind of jewel case and that always annoyed me about the Saturn's peripheral bundle games though. Like obviously now looking back, I would have preferred if they just put them in jewel cases like Japan. But now you've got like a shelf full of games.
Yeah.
And then you've got this fucking CD case that's like that Knights in Virtua Cop 1 and 2, like a sore thumb. But no, what a game, what a port. Just and all kicked off by watching it on that good old V. I need to get a tape player, mate, and watch this again, honestly.
Yeah, I've got a VHS player, but I haven't got that tape. Do you know? And I don't think I've ever actually watched the tape. I don't think I've even looked at the full. I think I've clicked through the video on YouTube. I've never actually watched the tape myself, so I do need to take the time to sit and watch it one day. But yeah, Virtua Cop is, what a feat. And I think the fact that it was obviously it's a shooting gallery, but the way that you move through every stage is a fully 3D world, effectively. Quite unlike anything else out there. Unlike, the stages in Virtua Fighter 2 or the courses in Sega Rally, and you've got all these people running across your targets, your civilians. It's so impressive the fact that it did that, so soon. And PlayStation wouldn't see anything similar until Die Hard Arcade, which was 96. Die Hard Trilogy, it was 96. Time Crisis, that was 97. It really is just shows what an achievement it was, and the fact that it inspired games like GoldenEye, etc. just shows what again, Sega really ahead of the curve there. Yeah, I think I got my copy of Virtua Cop 2 for Christmas 1996, and man, I absolutely loved it. Loved it. It was, again, to me, it was having the arcade in the home, and even though the arcade is kind of that much higher, and the gulf between the Model 2 and the Saturn is probably more noticeable. To me, I just thought, again, I've got the arcade in my home, and it would just absolutely blew me away. I'd played the arcade game in the summer in a holiday in a Butlins in an arcade. They had loads of arcade games in there, but yeah, I was like, I've got to get Virtua Cop 2, and yeah, I got it that Christmas, and the two games are perfect. I got Virtua Cop 1. I think I got it the following year, and I got it really cheap. But the benefit was I've got them both in the dual cases because both got the bundles. I ended up with two of the blue guns for co-op. For a while we had still got the Predator, which you could use on Saturn and PlayStation. But
Don't mind that.
that's a bit ropey, that gun. But having the two blue Virtua Stunners was just was amazing. But yeah, I mean the big three, you can't understate how impactful it was seeing those in 1995 and early 96, and even when I first played them in 1996, you know evergreen. And if people are discovering now just how good they are still.
It's, I think at the time as well, because of the start the Saturn had, and you were still seeing even early on the kind of retail bias. People try to push anyone interested in Saturn. We witnessed it. Have you heard of the Sony PlayStation? We're trying to take them away from it, and you know, of Virtua Fighter. But have you seen Tekken? No, but Daytona. Or have you seen Ridge Racer? It was very prominent, and these three games in one kind of little almost months period between December and January 95 and 96 just literally blew away every misconception about the Saturn. Like we were eating good on Saturn, man, with
Oh
those
yeah.
three games. Like you look at these, you're going, there's like no performance issues. They play amazing. They're on par gameplay wise with their arcade versions, and they're doing things that at that time I'm thinking no other system in the home is coming close to replicating these.
Yeah.
And it still to this day baffles me that those three games alone did not sell Saturns. Now, I don't think it's down to anything to do with quality. I just think it's down to retail and Sega themselves not marketing them. Like, can
Yeah.
you imagine if you had like big displays that you see now for games, like wait, the big three, like having that as a poster, as a banner, and having demo pods with them running, having like I did not see a single demo pod that had a virtual gun attached to it.
No.
Like, can you imagine if they set up like a Saturn demo pod, but instead of the kind of controllers being hooked in, they had the holsters like the arcade for the guns, and people could walk up and actually just play it like it was an arcade game. But there's no pound coin to put in here. And again, people would have stood there all day, wouldn't they? Just playing the bloody game. But that's
Yeah.
what you want people to do because you're wanting to try and sell it. But at retail, there was like no awareness. So I said before, like Virtua Fighter 2 and Sega Rally, I got them a week after each other. My uncle picked them up in Beatties in Glasgow City Centre in St Enoch Square, which became a Maplins eventually. Fun fact. Just remember what the shops I used to get games in have become now. But I can't remember what one it was. He got one week, then the next. I'm sure it was Virtua Fighter 2 the first week. It was Virtua Fighter 2 because then we went in and we got Sega Rally. And again, they were just sitting like kind of. There was just in a game section. There was no like promotional or new or like hot in or any demo pods or nothing. And we're sitting at Partick train station because we're getting the train back from Queen Street low level. You had to change at Partick to get the other line to go back to his house. And it wasn't, I was sitting there looking at just sitting like this, literally sitting at the station, like just, and also it had the wee seal of this. I didn't open it until I got home. And I'm like just sitting looking at the back, and like then he goes, "Hold on, did I not get you a game last week?" And I'm like, "Yes, you did. You got me that one last week, fool." I was like, but I mean, I was really lucky that I had an uncle who was so into his tech. And didn't remember what he spent his money on because he bought that much and basically just bought games willy-nilly. But because of that, I did get to experience a lot of the kind of Saturn early days, like when it was new. But I just getting those games so close together was just incredible. And as I say, mate, if there had been any kind of push promotionally wise, then who knows? I refuse to believe that those three games alone could not sell systems. Just Sega just probably didn't have the money to spend on promoting them. Just tragic.
Yeah, just bad or lack of marketing. Favor with the retailers with foot towards Sony. It's just it was no, and that's the thing. When people, I think that's what frustrates when people. I know we haven't mentioned it, which has been good. But when people talk about the commercial performance of the Sega Saturn, it just stands in stark contrast to the fact that the Saturn done so much right as a piece of hardware, as a system that played video games. It is an unquestionable success. It has games of every type, games of every genre. It has amazing peripherals, incredible visual clarity in some games, fantastic performance for 2D games, astonishing 3D games. It's just for reasons outside of its own control, outside of its software and hardware. It didn't quite catch the masses. And that's the frustration. Those three games really should, if they were on other systems, they would have been held up as the kind of the beacon of what video games should be. But, media bias and all sorts of other factors at play. Fortunately, and a lot of it is down to Sega's own doing. The way that they burn through goodwill, the way that they, had the relationships that they had with retailers, the surprise launch, all these things contributed, unfortunately. But that is and that's the thing. That's why it's good to talk about our memories, mate, because it just goes to show that the games themselves really did the talking.
And that's it, mate. As I said in the video I did about changing the narrative, like Saturn didn't know. Saturn doesn't know it's a failure. It's like it's a brilliant games console, and it is frustrating. That, as we said, these games couldn't reach the masses, but as a games console, people go into it this kind of year on year, decades on decades myths about, the stories that are attached to it that kind of bring down the quality of it. But it is a brilliant games console. It's the people go on about it was hard to program for, and yes, it was, but that doesn't mean that difficulty didn't stop people from making good games on it. It's not as if it was prohibitive. It gets held up as a reason for why it was so bad. The hardware was bad. Well, the hardware was actually based on how Sega built their arcade machines at the time. Yeah. So the way Sega made it made sense to Sega. Obviously, the industry was changing at a breakneck pace at that time, but none of these things stopped the Saturn from being a fucking brilliant games console. It has, again, we've talked about this in the Saturn's Myths episodes, like the Western library was bad. Well, it wasn't as expansive as the Japanese library, but it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
There's a handful of kind of, you can pull out some bad games on any system, but there's shitloads of great games on the Saturn. And it's funny whenever you see people who are picking up a Saturn now because they see this kind of renaissance that it's got, and they go, "Oh, I actually didn't know the Saturn was so good." We were fucking telling you it was 30 years ago. It's like we just didn't listen. It's like it's great to see so many people coming to it now and appreciating it and realizing that what we said all those years ago is true. It's got phenomenal games on it across every genre: 2D, 3D, racing, fighting, puzzle, shooting. There's something for everybody on this console, and that's a great thing about it. It's just so much choice, for people who are coming to it today. The means that we've got to be able to experience these games now, when Sarus and Fenriers and Satiators, and it's opened up the whole box. People can experience everything, and
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's an amazing machine.
it is, mate. And I think just on that point around, mass acceptance and people getting, people's awareness around it, I'm going to come up to probably what should be my last memory on this now, because I know I think we've been doing this for about an hour 45. Um, where's that gone? But
I know.
as I said,
I just looked at the clock then and went 8:15. I got up 2 hours 15 minutes ago for which happened. Where's that time went?
I know it's like I said the other day. It's like just give us a topic on Sega and we'll talk for hours.
So I say, I say, my wife says to me, "Why do these podcasts of yours have to last 2 hours?" Like, because when Dan and I talk Sega, we talk some Sega.
Yeah, it's only 2 hours because we have to show some form of restraint.
I know we literally we don't want to shunt any other shows off of the Radio Sega segment we've done. We've got a 2 hours 40 minutes episode with Sega Lord X as well. So your
Oh,
Shenmue Dojo, like, no, we're not taking another day off, man. Come on, guys, stop shunting us out the road.
yeah, I know. But yeah, so my last one, mate. I've got this is a combination of a bunch here, and I thought to kind of make the point, I was just bundle them all together. But and I talked about this on the discussion we had with Sega Lord X, which is coming up after in 2 weeks' time as of airing of this one. But Guardian Heroes, it was a game that got a really crap score in Saturn Power magazine. Really, I think it was rated the 97th best Sega Saturn game, which is quite funny if anyone's seen Uncle from Another World and him getting incensed about where Guardian Heroes is on the Sega Saturn top 100. Anyway, it was kind of like that, but I didn't know about Guardian Heroes until a friend had said to me, "Have you played Guardian Heroes?" It's like, no. He's like, "Oh, yeah, it's the best game on the Sega Saturn." So obviously I had to pick up a copy. Wow, blown away. But the memory's not so much about Guardian Heroes, which fantastic game, 2D scrolling beat 'em up, very much in the style of kind of Golden Axe, but rather than I think Golden Axe meets Fatal Fury in a way because you've got the whole lane system rather than being able to kind of walk in and out of like the foreign background at will. Fantastic sprite scaling in there. Characters get smaller and bigger the further and closer they are away. The camera pans out, huge stages, dozens of enemies on screen. It's spectacular and multiple paths. And of course, the multiplayer mode. You can play co-op and there's a 6-player battle mode. Um, at this time, I'd also got Saturn Bomberman. I'd got Duke Nukem 3D. Um, and I'd got Athlete Kings. And as I said, won't copy what I said and won't repeat what I said before too much. But the short version is we were meant to go and play GoldenEye on the N64, GoldenEye Mario Kart. My friend had said, "Yeah, well, 5 of us will go over, 5 or 6 of us will go over." His friend's got a free house, um, and then we'll play N64. I was like, "Can I bring my Sega Saturn? We might play a bit of that." And then my mate's like, "Yeah, why don't you bring that?" And he'd got a Sega Saturn himself at that point because of Sonic R. And I think it was mainly because of Sonic R's soundtrack. My mate Charlie had got a Sega Saturn. Um, so he had 2 pads. I had the official Mark II pad. I had a third-party Gamester pad, and I had the analog controller. So we had 5 pads. I had the multi-tap, and I brought over Guardian Heroes, Bomberman, Athlete Kings, Duke Nukem 3D. And I was like, well, we can play a few of those. Obviously, Duke Nukem 3D because it's got Death Tank SPI on it, which is, if anyone's not played it, think Worms, but with more basic graphics, but kind of you don't have to wait your turn. It's just chaos and everyone just fires all at once. Um, and hooked the Sega Saturn up first with a couple of us over. Started playing Guardian Heroes multiplayer battle mode. By the time his brother had got involved and the rest of our friends had come over, we were still playing Guardian Heroes. Now I got there at midday. We didn't stop playing until his parents got home at midnight. I think we broke to get food twice, and that was it. And when we had to move into the back room, we started playing Saturn Bomberman. We started playing Death Tank, and Death Tank was another one that we were playing until about 3 or 4 in the morning. And so off the back of that, I had one. The Sega Saturn was like, Dan, can we play this? Can we play this? You want to bring your Sega Saturn round? So we ended up, the Sega Saturn became something that people wanted to play more because of these games. And we'd play things like, against that Saturn Bomberman, Street Racer. Street Racer is one that people don't actually talk about. An extremely good port on the Sega Saturn. Has an 8-player split screen mode and some absolute bonkers modes. It's got like a football game, which is mental. We were playing that. We were playing the arena mode where you have to bash each other out. We're playing the racing mode. And obviously it's not Mario Kart, but it was fun and it was enjoyable. And then Athlete Kings, we're talking about Athlete Kings with Mel, and people were again really getting competitive, trying to get the best performance times, like jumps, etc., throws. And then that when Winter Heat came out in 1998, then that became the obsession. That became right. To me and my mate, he'd got a Sega Saturn for Christmas off the back of Guardian Heroes, etc. We both got Winter Heat, and it was every other night we were playing it all the time. Weekends we were playing it. Coming home after the pub, we were playing it. 2005, I remember the Xbox 360 was out. I think it might have been 2006 actually, because I think we still had the Xbox 360, and it was like, Dan, get the Saturn out. Let's play some Winter Heat. This is some 8 years after it came out. So this is a combination of a bunch of memories. But the overriding thing is, when I got friends playing the Sega Saturn, they loved it. They fell in love with it. And it's a shame that, that wasn't something that Sega was able to do themselves. But it just goes to show, and these aren't, things like Death Tanks Vi and stuff, they aren't the best of the system, but they are games with a hook, and it just showed the sheer breadth of the library that the Sega Saturn had. And while it wasn't quite N64, is the multiplayer console of choice for that generation. I don't think there can be any argument. GoldenEye, the wrestling games, Mario Kart, fantastic. But the Sega Saturn was a decent second place, and I think it was far beyond what the PlayStation had in terms of multiplayer options, especially since the Sega Saturn by default had that 6-player adapter which gave you seven controllers, whereas I think the PlayStation one was just a 4-player one. There wasn't too many games that supported it. But yeah, that's a bunch of memories all mashed into one, just to show what an absolute delight it was to play in multiplayer. And I know a lot of our experiences have been, this is my memory of it, me playing this game. But these ones are all kind of special to me because these are my school friends that I still talk to, and friends that I'm still very close to, and how they turned from cynics and you can bring your Saturn if you want, to that one weekend where everyone became a Sega Saturn fan.
Brilliant, mate. There you go. Nobody wanted to touch the N64 once the Saturn went on. You know what I mean? It's a 12-hour Saturn shift, man. You've put that thing through its paces. That's a test of the durability of that tank of a system.
I'm pretty sure that Saturn is the one that gave out as well in the end, though. Into
Well,
that.
It gave all for the cause, mate. It gave it. Oh, but it's funny you talk about like kind of like friends and stuff like that, because like you can't talk about, I can't talk about Sega Saturn without mentioning Sam, right? It's like best mate through, met him in primary school. He moved up from England to Scotland whenever he was in primary seven, midway through that year. Became friends pretty quickly. We're friends all through secondary school, college years. And, like Sega Saturn was, as well as the Dreamcast later on, but the Saturn primarily was a massive part of that. Like, he'd come up to my uncle's with me on weekends to play Saturn. That's where he first experienced it. My uncle would go and rent some games, like we would like Toshinden, Wipeout, Toshinden, Wipeout, was Victory Goal as well, was kind of games that we played. Also playing Virtua Fighter, and Stan will remember this as well. My uncle because whenever I would come up, he'd be doing stuff in his kind of area of the kind of games room that he had. So he set the Saturn up behind his sofa with a CRT behind there. So we would move the sofa forward a bit to fit two chairs in to sit around and play the Saturn in there. But it's like whenever he got his own, shortly after me, and games that he would get that I didn't buy. So I experienced like Sonica, Duke Nukem 3D, Athlete Kings, Fighters Megamix, Winter Heat, they were Quake as well. He got all those and he would bring them over to mine and I would play them at his. So those are my memories of those games are all kind of like, Sam was a demon at Sonic R. That guy knew where everything was, man. I used to sit and watch him play it sometimes. Like he knew where every coin was, how many rings needed to get through each gate to take shortcuts, man. The guy was just a demon at it. Duke Nukem 3D as well, man. He loved that game. That was one of his favourites on there as well. And I've talked before about with the walks we would do at SEGAGuys to check out the latest games at Charlie's and imports and PAL games. But the thing about it is that Sam and I kind of lost touch. I would say mid 2000s, round about just before Xbox 360 came out. Unfortunately, fell out of touch, and it was just by chance that we kind of started talking again, kind of through like social media stuff like that. I would say maybe about maybe 5 years ago now. So we're out of touch for a while, various reasons that I don't want to kind of go into in the podcast. But they always say that the mark of somebody who's a real best mate is if you've not spoke to them for years, but you feel that you've only spoke to them yesterday.
Yeah.
And with Sam and I, we definitely had that. And the funny thing is, we're on WhatsApp. He stays on the other side of the city to me. But we go on like WhatsApp and we talk often. And we're still having these conversations about Sega Saturn. I'm helping him get his Saturn back. He's still got all his collection from back in the day, which is amazing. It's all boxed away, but he wants to get his Saturn set back up again. And I'm telling him about the Saru and stuff like that, and he's looking at getting one. I'm telling him, what HDMI cable, get yourself a Rad 2X and get it all set up back up. I'll sort your SD card out, mate. Don't worry, I'll get you up and running. But we're still kind of sharing those memories. We're talking about these games, even in our mid 40s. We're still talking about these games, these memories, and I think I couldn't. That's probably the ultimate memory of the Sega Saturn for me, is that I got to experience it with him and have so many brilliant memories tied to it. So just Athlete Kings, just such great fun on that as well. Just an amazing game, competitive as hell, but a great laugh. Worldwide Soccer '97, used to play that together. Laughing at the commentary. That must be a spot kick, mate. You've broken down in a centre circle. You know what I mean? It's like just so many wee things. But the fact that the Saturn, even though it's been packed away in Sam's cupboard for years, the fact that we didn't speak for probably the best part of a decade, that we can still come back to the memories, and it's as if we're just talking about yesterday. So the system, it's got such an emotional hook in that regards. So just like you're saying, mate, it's mates that you had back then that you're still friends with now, that you still remember those things with. And I think that's why this black box that sits under our TV, it's why it's still there today. It's just there's so much in terms of gameplay, in terms of friendships, in terms of experiences. It all just, it's a box of plastic and metal and wires, but it's got a soul to it that is made up of all these personal memories just merged into one.
Yeah, spot on, mate. And yeah, it's interesting when, especially when we were having the discussion with Mel, for me, and probably out of time in terms of our own memories now, but a lot of my memories, especially in the later years, are tied to Charlie, who got his Sega Saturn for Sonic R. Both got our consoles modded together to play import games, and both went on that voyage to discovery. And he was to, for all intents and purposes, he was, what Sam was to you, and what Nate was to Mel. You
Yep.
know, and we were kids, we couldn't all, or teenagers, we couldn't all buy all the things that we wanted to do. So and it was the same with Bedjo and Dibs. They were talking about the fact there was four of them that had Sega Saturns, and they'd buy a game, and then they'd all swap it round, and they'd all get to play
Aye,
it.
aye, aye, true.
And it's magic. It is that's the magic of it all. And it's wonderful that all just forms part of the Sega Saturn's identity. And then I think that feeds through kind of to the modern day in this sense of community that we have with the guys that our viewers and audience, and the SHIRO community, and the Discord channels, and social media, for as much as stuff like X, Twitter, etc., are not as great as they used to be, but they're still, when you get some like-minded people, and people don't necessarily have to agree on everything, and that's why you have these discussions, and the scope of discussion and having that sense of community and debate and discourse is all part of what the whole journey of the Sega Saturn is all about, and that's what makes it special. So yeah, it really is such a huge part of it, mate.
Aye, it was there at a very formative time of our lives as well. But the fact that there's been those kind of constants, in terms of friendships, and that's what I says in my video then as well. It's like it's the Saturn. It didn't just create, you know, new friendships in terms of the community, but it reignited old ones as well. In terms of myself and Sam as well. So, aye, it's just a brilliant, brilliant system. Um, I'm I'm so glad that Munko decided to, for whatever reason, made him go to Comet and Partick and buy it that morning. I don't know what made him go and buy it. Whether it was by, he's never ever told me. Maybe ask him whether it was by chance or if he knew it was coming, if he'd heard about it. But I'm so grateful that he did, because he set me on a gaming journey that is led to me sitting here today. So thank you to the Sega Saturn.
And
Long may you reign.
indeed, mate. Not only did he buy it, but he kept it for you all those years later, and
Aye, that's it, mate.
amazing.
Aye, that's as I say, found it in the loft during lockdown, just covered in a weird white spray undercoat. He like to do his projects up in the loft, spray paint and stuff and all that. And I found this. Do you want it? Aye, you're fucking right, I do. And I restored it to its former cosmetic glory, and it's my Saturn that I play on to this day. So again, that's why as well that kind of hooked with that particular console. Like my Dreamcast, I think if it was my Dreamcast that I got back in the day, I would probably have the same attachment. But the fact that that's that Saturn that I seen on that day, but aye, there's just so much nostalgia and kind of there's an emotional hook there. You can't lie, and maybe it does blind a wee bit to some of the kind of opinions, but taking even all that aside, there's no denying that Sega Saturn's an absolutely fantastic games console. It succeeded where it had to. It played amazing games, and at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
It is indeed, mate. And don't take just our word for it. Here are some memories from our friends and community members.
Hey everyone, Saturn Dave here from Sega Saturn SHIRO, and happy 30th anniversary of the Sega Saturn. It's crazy to think that it's been 30 years. This is my original Sega Saturn that I picked up Christmas of 96, or New Year's 97. Picked it up used, saved up for a while, and I'm so happy that I did, because it's been an amazing console and it's given me plenty of great memories. I guess my favorite memory of all time would have to be when I picked up Nights into Dreams. Saved up for that for a really long time and picked up Nights into Dreams with the 3D control pad with my little brother, and we took it home and played it, and I just fell in love with that game, and it's still to this day my favorite game of all time. I'd like to add to that, my favorite modern memory of Saturn is really when my bro Trainoco Patrick from Sega Saturn SHIRO DM'd me and said, hey, would you like to start a podcast back in 2017? And yeah, I absolutely wanted to start a podcast. I wanted to talk about Sega Saturn, and have made a lot of friendships along the way, including James and Dan, the SEGAGuys. And it's been great. And I absolutely love the Sega Saturn. I love this community. Love all the great, exciting things that are happening with the Saturn. And I hope you guys have a great 30th anniversary celebrating the Sega Saturn. It's just Saturn Day reminding you that you must play Sega Saturn.
Good day, Sega guys. My favorite Saturn memory is probably the same thing. The first time I played Sega Rally at home and Virtua Fighter 2 at home. They look so good and the controls are so tight. My mind was just completely blown. So happy birthday, Sega Saturn from Down Under, and here's to 30 more years.
Hi guys, it's Phil here, long-time listener, and I just wanted to share a memory of the Sega Saturn with you. Back in, I think it was 1995 or maybe 1996, I had a friend at school who said, I've got a Sega Saturn, but I'm looking to sell it. Would you like to come round to my house and have a look? And I thought, great, I haven't got any money, but I'll come and play your Saturn, that's fine. And he invited me round, and I was a Mega Drive owner, I think, at the time, and I even had a 32X. But he showed me his Saturn, and there was two games I think that converted me at that point. The first one was Virtua Cop with the big fat blue Virtua gun, and just being able to fire off rounds, it felt like being in an arcade. Wonderful, huge polygon characters. You could just blast. So much fun on that game. And the other one was X-Men Children of the Atom, which was like nothing I'd ever seen before. I was a massive Street Fighter fan at that point, but this went another level up from that in my view. These huge characters doing amazing moves and just kind of crazy over the top gameplay, and I just thought, this is a great console. I'm going to need to get one of these consoles. And I did end up, I think I saved up, I saved and I traded my old consoles and things like that. And I eventually went to a shop near me in, I think it was Coulston, South London kind of area. And as you've mentioned on previous podcasts, they tried to talk me out of buying the Saturn, saying, no, you want a PlayStation instead, it's outselling the Saturn 5 to 1. I was like, no, I don't. I want to play Virtua Cop. So I came away with my Saturn, and I never regretted it. Anyway, keep up the good work, guys. God bless, and take care.
I was actually very young when my family got the Saturn, so I didn't actually have that many memories of playing the games, because I was too young to really remember that much of it. So for me, my memories of the Saturn were not of gaming, but of actually watching video CDs. Yeah, my mom, she'd play edutainment video CDs on the Saturn, and I'd watch it. Like, I watched stuff like, Teletubbies, not sure what I learned from there. Maybe that's why I picked up the accent. Another one I watched was Disney's Magic English, which was a sort of a clip show where they had clips from the movie and also karaoke segments with the songs from the movies, but also the live action bits with kids like talking English and stuff. I guess that also taught me. I guess it might be strange for some people to think of the Sega Saturn as a video player, but that was how it was back in Southeast Asia, right? Because this was DVDs were out, but it wasn't mainstream. And also video CDs were cheaper to make, so it was really popular back then. At least where I was from. Sega Saturn, they were the first to really promote this as a selling feature for the console. Because vendors, if you bought a Sega Saturn from a vendor, they would simply have install this card in the VCD card inside the Saturn for you, right? So it became an expectation for consumers to be like, oh, if I want to buy a game console that can also watch video CDs, I'm gonna get a Sega Saturn, right? And that's how it came to be that I would end up watching all these edutainment videos on my Sega Saturn, right? And not just that too, there are so many movies and anime that came out on VCD, but that's another story. As for the games, for me, I ended up like rediscovering a lot of the games as I grew up and I got back into retro gaming. And obviously, hey, what is there to say, man? So many great games. It's no wonder that so many people remember the Sega Saturn fondly when you got so many games like, I mean, come on, Grandia. I mean, come on, doesn't get more iconic than that, does it? Right? I mean, Sakura Wars. Such a defining game for the era. And also the arcade games, man. Just elevator action. Wow, just so many great games at all. And I guess for me, most recently maybe, but also not recently, because I probably played it as a kid, right? But Sega Rally, right? Because I've been playing it a lot for the past month or so, ever since I dug up my old steering wheel controller, and I was like, hey, might as well find something to play, right? So I took out Sega Rally, and man, that game is just it's insanely addicting, I think obviously everyone's played it at this point, and for good reason, man. But playing it, like digging it up and just like unlocking everything, and then just slowly getting better and better at the game, man. What a fantastic game, man, Sega Rally. But yeah, I guess that's all I have to say.
Hey, it's Retro Martin. My favourite Saturn memory is twofold. It originally started back in about 2004, 2005 when I did a console swap with a friend of mine from college and uni. I lent him my PlayStation and he lent me his Saturn with a bunch of games. So I finally got to try out the first two Panzer Dragoons and Dark Saviour, which I really enjoyed. But best of all out of the bunch for me was one of my top three of all time, Shining Force 3. I couldn't put that game down. I played it to death until I'd completed it. Started up a new save immediately. It was just outstanding. And then that culminated in 2023 last year when I finally got to try out scenarios 1, 2 and 3 back to back translated, and just outstanding in every conceivable way. That's a memory that's going to just last forever. Yeah, amazing.
Hello there, Andy Mackey here. I first played the Sega Saturn when we was on a family holiday in Florida at Epcot in Disney. Walking through the park, and there was a little building in the park called Innovations, which had all the different Sega consoles. Probably Mega Drive they probably had a 32X and a Mega CD as well. But yeah, the first thing that I saw when I walked in there was the Saturn and World Wide Soccer 97, and played it, absolutely loved it. Knew that I absolutely had to try and buy the console somehow when I got back, even though I was only 9 years old. So yeah, many weeks of saving up pocket money, and I was able to afford the bundle from Dixon's, which was the console, Sega Rally, World Wide Soccer 97 and SEGAGuys. And yep, and as I say, the rest is history. Absolutely fell in love with the console. It just felt differently, like even though we had a Mega Drive in the house, which was actually my older brother's, which I absolutely loved, this just felt like something different, Then like fast forward to the year 2020, and during lockdown I was able to find this little podcast called the SEGAGuys, which was only 3 episodes in. Listened to, I think it was episode talking about the Sega Saturn it was, and these two blokes who I've never met before, or I met since, but I just heard an absolute passion for this console, which was like, well, I might do it. I might have a look on eBay and see if I can get myself one of these consoles again after it's been like 20 odd years or so. So yeah, I was able to pick up a console again on eBay. In time, eventually fitted a Fenrir in there. But yeah, Sega Saturn, for me, everyone, it's the... I believe it was Sega's best console. I know people love the Dreamcast and Mega Drive, but for me, the Saturn was just... It did so many things right. It did phenomenal 3D games, phenomenal 2D games. It innovated in ways that no other companies did, or if they did, they followed Sega. So yeah.
So my first memories of the Sega Saturn were as a very envious spectator, for reasons I don't have time to elaborate on. I didn't own one when it was contemporary, but I'd seen footage in magazines like CVG, TV shows, demos in shops, and as a huge fan of Sega in the arcades, the idea that it could play games like Daytona, Virtua Fighter in your living room was huge at the time. Early 2000s is when I bought my first PAL Sega Saturn, when I had a disposable income finally, and it was retro gaming even back then. I loved it, but I did end up giving it away, and you have to fast forward to 2020, I got my Japanese Sega Saturn, discovered the SEGAGuys, and I haven't really looked back since. I'm loving it, still discovering new things on it. It's incredible.
Hey Sega guys, happy 30th birthday to my favourite console of all time, the Sega Saturn, from Andrew here in Perth, Western Australia. In terms of favourite memories of the console, there's too many to mention, but here's a few that stand out in my mind right now. The evening I brought my Saturn, I played it for 8 hours straight, amazed at the visuals of Daytona USA Championship Circuit Edition, the creepiness of Doom, and the three-dimensional exploration of Tomb Raider. One group of friends and I spent many nights facing each other in matches of Street Fighter Alpha 2 until the wee hours of the mornings. I even recorded the music from Akuma's stage onto cassette for one of them. Another group of friends played so much Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo that we saw falling blocks in our minds as we fell asleep one night. During my final year of high school exams, I skipped studying to stay up late, playing through Uru and its underground ruins in Panzer Dragoon Saga, absolutely awed by the changing scenery and times of day, as well as the atmospheric music, dramatic boss fights, and clever puzzles. I hired the analog controller one time to see how good it was for racing games, and it came with knights. I gave the game a shot and fell in love with its charm. I could offer you so many more great memories, but I'd be here all day. And that's what the Saturn is to me, a system that delivered so much greatness. Cheers.
The Saturn is pure Sega in their most creative and joyful pomp. The combination of amazing gameplay, music and art design led to some incredible, beautiful, emotional and unforgettable experiences delivering that Sega feel, none more so embodied than in my favourite ever game, Nights into Dreams. Some of my favourite memories are also recent ones, being involved in the Satiator, SHIRO and the SEGAGuys communities, making new friends and even playing Saturn online, including playing Sega Rally over the copper phone lines with a very good friend and winning a Christmas Nights Twitter tournament last Christmas, and finally getting to play Panzer Dragoon Saga. I've been playing the Saturn since '97 and it still continues to elicit joy. Truly a fantastic and my all-time favourite video game system.
So one of my most enduring Saturn memories is, in a way, quite a mundane one, but it's what it has meant and led to over the years, I guess, that makes it so important to me. So setting the scene, it's April 1998. 15-year-old me is out of the shops with my mum in Chippenham. We pop into Woolworths. And while my mum was wandering around the shop, getting whatever she needed, I, of course, went to the game section to have a browse, as you do. And there it was. Panzer Dragoon Saga. One copy, just one, trapped inside one of those big hard plastic security cases that you get removed at the checkout when you go to buy it. Held it tight, read the back of the box, and just stood staring at it, really. Like, I'd been reading about the game in Sega Saturn magazine since the first news story broke about it, first screenshots, and then all the features and previews that followed. And for a fairly starved Saturn gamer, let's be honest, this game had been my North Star, really, for months. And finding it that day in Woolworths, in Chippenham, of all places, was like finding an oasis in the desert, really. I was so excited, stood there waiting for my mum to finish whatever it was she was doing and come over. As soon as she did, I was like, Mum, got to buy this game, got to buy it now. I had enough money saved up. I knew it was coming. I knew the release date was, I think, sometime around then. So I had the money, but I had no way of paying for it in the moment. You know, didn't have a debit card back then. Didn't carry around. You know, I was a kid. I didn't carry around 40 quid's worth of cash on me, and my mum didn't have any cash on her either at the time. So I needed to get to a bank. So I asked my mum if she would just wait there with the game, 5 minutes, run and get the money, come straight back. Now, unfortunately, as is often the case with mums in situations like this, she doesn't quite appreciate the gravity of the situation here. You know, this was Panzer Dragoon Saga, but to my mum, this was just a kid nagging to buy a video game. You know, it's just a game. I'm not letting you run around town by yourself. You know, we'll come back for it. We'll come back for it. It'll be fine. Just need to pop to another shop, and then we'll go to the bank and we'll come back for it. Of course, this was entirely unacceptable. I did at least manage to convince her that this had to happen now. So no waiting, no other shops. We were going to the bank now. But I did have to put the game down, back on the shelf. I remember staring at it as I left the store, and I speed walked to the bank, got the cash, speed walked back, all the time just terrified that I would get back and find that the game was gone and not on the shelf. But there it was, still trapped in its plastic prison, waiting for me. I grabbed it, bought it, and so began really a love affair with what is probably still my favourite game of all time. It's a toss-up between Saga and Nights into Dreams, which is another magical and unique Saturn experience. And it was like nothing I'd ever experienced. And that still holds true today. It's just such a special game on such a special console. And to think if my mum hadn't dragged me to Chippenham and then into Woolworths, of all places, I'd probably never have found it. You know, I've never seen the game. I never saw the game in a shop before that day, and I've never seen it in a shop since that day. And I still wonder what it was doing there, really. But the gaming gods were smiling on me that day, and I shall be forever grateful.
Hey guys, it's Jason Madison here, aka Play Sushi UK, and I just want to wish the Sega Saturn a massive happy 30th birthday. You know, what an incredible system, and one that I never owned as a kid and during its commercial lifespan. In fact, as some of you may know, I got my first Saturn in 2022, 2 years ago to this day, near enough. No, 2.5 years ago. Anyway, you know, what an incredible system. You know, you may have heard me refer to it like, well, its library in particular as an Aladdin's cave, just waiting to be discovered. You know, a Pandora's box waiting to be opened. And I've had some incredible experiences and garnered some incredible memories just from having this system in my hands. And oh, dearie me. But I will say, you know, I've gone through many of the games that I adored on the PlayStation, you know, back from that period of time, like Resident Evil. And I've also, you know, it's just weird, you know, in this decade playing games for the first time and cherishing them, you know, games like Sega Rally, Daytona USA, Police Noughts, Grandia, Bulk Slash, you know, the many 2D fighters in the Japanese library of the Saturn. And there's, you know what, I've not even scratched the surface still 2.5 years later. There's so much to discover in Sega Saturn. And, you know, as many of us would say, play Sega Saturn. But my most cherished memory, you know, before I stop talking, is just playing Sega Rally on this online racing tournament that was held by SHIRO on Twitter, or X as we call it. That was just an incredible week, you know, just trying to, you know, beat other people's times, doing the time trials, and it just made me love the game even more. And I've got to say, it was my game of the year of 2022. But you know what, if you haven't got a Saturn, what are you doing? Go out there, get a system. There's so many ODE options. There's so many games, there's so many peripherals, and there's so many people that you can make friends with who also are loving the system, you know, in 2024. So I just want to say, again, happy 30th to the Saturn, and thank you, SEGAGuys, for all of the great content and coverage that you give this wonderful system that, you know, was neglected by many, but is now being loved by many in 2024. Over and out.
Some of my best memories of the Saturn actually occurred before the machine ever launched in Japan. There was an immense excitement around the hardware and its upcoming games, and I can remember scouring through every magazine I could get my hands on to learn more. It was an ever-changing flow of information too. I remember when Sega tried to position the Saturn as a 64-bit machine, essentially adding the two 32-bit CPUs together to reach that conclusion. I remember the early pictures of Saturn games like Virtua Fighter, Daytona USA, and Panzer Dragoon, trying to animate those images in my head and how the final product would look on the real thing. I remember the import shops getting more information on availability as the launch date closed in and how much they were going to charge for it. I remember the talk of a Saturn-based arcade board, the STV Titan, which would see support as well. I looked everywhere in those early days for a cabinet, hoping to catch a glimpse of anything that could show me what Saturn games were gonna look like. Of course, I didn't know at the time the STV didn't see a North American release until 1995. When I finally did get my hands on the Saturn, it was almost a sigh of relief. After what felt like years of waiting, I finally had Sega's 32-bit powerhouse. Software was kinda slow at first, but I didn't care a lick. I played Virtua Fighter to death, went into Clockwork Knight when it hit, and then worked my way through Gale Racer, Panzer Dragoon, Daytona USA, and Astal over the next several months. And once that ball got to rolling, I entrenched myself in the Japanese import scene. It gave me roughly 4.5 years of unforgettable experiences and a group of games I still proudly play today. It may not have sold well in the majority of the world, and it may not have had the largest library, but what Sega accomplished with the Saturn was a platform full of great games that felt like nothing else on the market. And say what you will about the business side of things, but in the years of repetition and sameness that would follow it, that was one hell of a victory you have to admire.
Fantastic. Thank you for everyone who submitted their memories. And, mate, that brings us to the end. Sega Saturn, mate. What a console. I mean, we've had to be quite conservative with our own personal memories here because I think we could have gone on for, it's Saturday, isn't it? Could have gone on for another 12 hours, just like our Guardian Heroes session.
That's it, mate. The microphone might have gave out like your poor Saturn's disk drive did after that gargantuan gaming session. But it's just... what a system, mate. And, hopefully these kind of memories will kind of resonate with people that are listening. They might make someone go out and decide to pick up a Saturn. Maybe they've been on the fence, or they've just seen how much we love it, and the memories that we've shared might make them want to go in. And it's even if you have one, you listen to this, just go and play it. Just put down what you're doing and just go and play some Sega Saturn.
Yeah, first thing that was going through my mind just now is I cannot wait to play my Sega Saturn again.
Please, let's get the chores done for the day. See if the wee one goes for a nap later. Oldest will probably want to just watch a wee movie or colour in or something like that. Maybe a wee window of opportunity for me later.
Yeah, but wonderful. So, friends, viewers, listeners, I hope you've enjoyed these pair of old bastards just reminiscing about their old Sega Saturn memories. Join the club. If you've got your own memories, please share them. We'd love to hear them. Absolutely love to hear them. Hopefully you've been sharing some, memories in the live chat, or share them in the comments. We'd love to read them. That stuff just makes us go all fuzzy inside. If you want to get involved in the discussion, join the SEGAGuys Discord. You can share your memories in the Radio Sega Discord, the Sega Saturn SHIRO Discord. However, just engage with the fabulous people in all of those communities, because there's so many Sega Saturn fans now. It's wonderful to get them all together. But that brings us to the end. If you've enjoyed this video, please give us a like and a subscribe, because that really helps the channel. Don't forget to hit that bell for notifications, because we bring new content every single week, and sometimes new shorter videos in between. And if you want to be extra mega, think about becoming a member with a bunch of awesome perks from as little as 99p, such as getting your name read out, as our premium members are about to right now.
Certainly, our premium members for this episode are G-Man, Stiff Peaks, I Am Mikowski, Craig Williamson, Resident SD, P-Wall, Tom Thumb, Peter007, Andy Mackey, Nick Tullock, and of course, our brothers at Sega Saturn, SHIRO. Again, as always, thank you very much to all members and subscribers for your continued support. The push to 10k is on. We're almost at 8.5. Can we get there for the end of the year? We'll soon see. But as we've said, thank you very much for all your continued support. Any memories you've got, get them in the chat, the Discord, comments. Love to hear them. And just thank you very much for tuning in.
Yes, thank you very much. But we have one last request for all of you. You must play Sega Saturn.
You
See
must.
You on the Sega side.
Sega!